Chapter 648. Apart from Gu Fei and 100 Lives Jinglin, no one else was planning to go offline for dinner on time. In the eyes of these players, Gu Fei and 100 Lives Jinglin were perverts. In fact, in the eyes of Gu Fei and 100 Lives Jinglin, these players who didn't even eat dinner were not normal people. Yin Zhongmu, the guild leader of a major guild, still had the same temperament. On the way out of the valley, he tried to find out what guild they were in, and how they were doing. Gu Fei understood his intention and replied casually. It was fine as long as Yin Zhongmu understood that he didn't want to join a guild. 100 Lives Jinglin was honest. In addition, he had become a bully in the eyes of the players when he entered Sunset City. He had never been roped in by anyone before. When he heard Yin Zhongmu asking about this, he didn't suspect anything and told him the truth. When Yin Zhongmu heard that such a famous expert didn't have a guild, he was overjoyed and immediately started roping him in. First, he said that both of them were 5 roaches, but 100 Lives Jinglin was confused. 5 roaches, are you one too? Hee, I don't think I've introduced myself. My name is Yin Zhongmu. Yin Zhongmu chuckled. 100 Lives Jinglin scratched his head and looked at Gu Fei. Yin Zhongmu? Is there such a person in the 5 roaches? Yin Zhongmu looked at his honest face and suddenly felt a little nervous. He hadn't checked the experience ranking in the past few days. Could it be that someone had taken his place? When he was about to confirm with his friend, 100 Lives Jinglin said, 5 roaches. I remember its drifting, slender waist dance, wandering blade, deep water, and me. Yin Zhongmu's mouth opened wide. Gu Fei couldn't bear it anymore and interrupted. Which version are those? You've killed Wandering Blade before. How can you still be one of the 5 roaches? Oh, I forgot. 100 Lives Jinglin came to a realization. Then who are they now? Yin Zhongmu was stunned for a while before he said, Now it's you drifting me, strange pupil, and against the current. 100 Lives Jinglin scratched his head. Obviously, he had never heard of them. Apart from the 2 of you, they're all mages. Gu Fei knew them very well. Right, isn't going against the flow what your Cloud City does? Cloud Twilight said. Gu Fei nodded. He's also a guild leader. I have. Cloud Twilight replied. Does Brother Qianli know about Strange Eye? Cloud Twilight asked. It's a woman from Xiaowu City. Gu Fei told him. The situation of the 5 roaches wasn't mysterious at all. If you wanted to, you could just go on the forum and gossip about them. Yin Zhongmu actually had some understanding of these people. He was just using them to find a topic for conversation with Gu Fei. Otherwise, when the 2 of them started talking, they would say things like single buckle, double row of hands, palm insertion, elbow rotation, and so on. He really could not stand it. Now that Yin Zhongmu was the leader of the 10 Societies Alliance, he no longer made decisions based on his hot-bloodedness and his own likes and dislikes. Recruiting new people, coordinating guild members, negotiating with other guilds. Even though he was just a leader in the game, he still had many responsibilities. In this position, Yin Zhongmu also wanted to do his best. Of course, he couldn't speak without thinking. For example, he had nothing to say to the other party, but he was still trying to find something to say. This kind of smooth way of doing things was more like Silvermoon's style in the past. If it was Yin Zhongmu's original temperament, he wouldn't have anything to say. If he had nothing to say, then he wouldn't have said anything. He wouldn't be like this, talking nonsense that he clearly knew was meaningless. Sometimes, when Yin Zhongmu calmed down and thought about it, he felt a little disgusted. He suddenly thought of an unbearably vulgar saying. When you are in the pugilistic world, you can't help yourself. He seemed to have a bit of this concept now. Yin Zhongmu gradually changed the topic back to the development of the guild. He talked about the concept of building his guild, and the major problems they were facing. Of course, one of the major problems was the extreme lack of talent. Then, he changed the topic and was about to probe 100-era strategist, who didn't have a guild, when he saw Gu Fei stop and say to him, Alright old Yin, why are you sending us so far? It's not like we don't know the way. We can go back by ourselves. You should hurry back and practice the efficient leveling method. Ah. Yin Zhongmu was startled. So it turned out that the other party didn't listen to him at all? Tears streamed down Yin Zhongmu's face. He really wasn't good at this. Just as he was about to wave goodbye, Gu Fei's expression suddenly tightened. Someone's here. What? Yin Zhongmu was startled. A thief in stealth. Gu Fei jumped to the side after saying this. 100-era strategist's reflexes were also extremely fast. He raised his hand and slapped the air, scattering a handful of white lime. Unfortunately, there was wind at the entrance of the valley. 100-era strategist didn't take into account the direction of the wind, so the lime was blown back by the wind and landed on all three of them. Gu Fei and 100-era strategist didn't care, but Cloud Zhongmu suffered. A thief's habit in battle was to immediately go into stealth as soon as something strange happened. Cloud Zhongmu was in the middle of going into stealth when 100-era strategist's lime was blown back by the wind, interrupting his stealth. Cloud Zhongmu was dumbfounded. He didn't know what to do. Cloud Zhongmu, one of the 5 roaches who had come out of PvP Crazed City's Moonlit City, was interrupted by such a method while he was in stealth. He didn't know what to do. Dutch. Gu Fei was also surprised when he saw Cloud Zhongmu standing there like a block of wood. He had fought side by side with ordinary players many times. Even though these players couldn't tell where a stealth thief was, as long as they knew there was a thief in stealth, they would run around in a flashy manner. In short, they wouldn't stand still and wait for a thief to ambush them. Cloud Twilight was a player from Moonlit City. How come he didn't have this bit of common sense? Cloud Zhongmu felt like he had just woken up from a dream. He hurriedly started moving. He skillfully took 3 to 5 steps in a zigzag pattern, then turned around and threw out a handful of lime. Moonlit City and Whitestone City were close neighbors. As the interactions between the two cities increased, white lime was no longer something that only Whitestone players could enjoy. The PvP maniacs from Moonlit City probably carried a lot more white lime than the players from Whitestone City. Cloud Twilight's action wasn't as thoughtless as 100 Realms strategists. He followed the direction of the wind, and directly opened up a bag. The white lime was swept up by the wind and covered the sky and earth. In the blink of an eye, a total of 8 thieves had emerged from the valley entrance. The 8 thieves all had their faces covered, but when Cloud Midnight glanced at them, he sneered. "Succubus, you big idiot. What are you trying to do with your face covered? Do you think I can't tell that you're a grandson?" In the eyes of Gu Fei and 100 Lives strategist, these 8 thieves were all wearing the same type of equipment. They were about the same height and build, so it was difficult to tell them apart. However, Cloud Zhongmu was actually able to recognize someone he knew. Gu Fei had a whole new level of respect for him. When one of the thieves heard Cloud Zhongmu call out his name, he pulled down his mask with a gloomy expression. Just as he was about to say something, Cloud Zhongmu's expression changed. "Fuck, it really is a bastard. Fuck." The thief called Succubus immediately became flustered. He wanted to pull his mask back up again, but he had already put it down. There was no point in pulling it back up again. While he was at a loss, the other 7 thieves all shot him looks of disdain. Gu Fei was also dumbfounded. It turned out that Cloud Zhongmu didn't recognize him at all. He was just blindly shouting. But in the end, this guy was too honest. He was tricked into revealing himself just like that. Gu Fei didn't say anything. He also thought that Cloud Zhongmu really did recognize the other party. Cloud Zhongmu's acting skills weren't just for show. "Fucking bastard, trying to sneak up on me?" Cloud Zhongmu continued to sneer. Gu Fei could tell that the two of them definitely knew each other, and most likely had a grudge against each other. Most of the disputes between guilds were just a bunch of messy accounts. It was basically a fight for the sake of fighting. If you asked someone to give an explanation, the answer would most likely be, he was too pretentious, so they beat him up. As such, there really wasn't much right or wrong about these kinds of disputes. Gu Fei believed that this was something the players found for themselves, so he didn't want to ruin it. He waved his hand at Cloud Zhongmu and said, "Alright then, old Cloud, I'll be leaving first." Ha! Cloud Twilight was stunned. Even the 8 thieves on the other side were flabbergasted. This person was clearly with Cloud Zhongmu. Even if they weren't close friends, he was still able to say "we'll be leaving first" in this kind of situation. Wasn't this a bit too shameless? Cloud Zhongmu wasn't prepared for this. In his memory, it was Gu Fei who helped them beat the former Dust Guild to the point where they couldn't even turn the tables. Who would have thought that things were different now? The situation at that time had its own special characteristics. The current Gu Fei didn't want to disturb his fun in the game. However, if Gu Fei wanted to leave, Cloud Zhongmu couldn't just hug his leg and cry, "Help me, don't go." He was stunned for a moment before saying, "Oh, slow down. Okay." Gu Fei nodded and left without looking back. 100 Eras Jingren followed beside him, but he kept looking back and asking, "Don't you need help?" When the magic pig saw Cloud Zhongmu's confused expression, he laughed from the bottom of his heart. "Don't be afraid, Cloud Zhongmu. You just want help, right? I'll call someone for you." Cloud Zhongmu and Magic Pig. These two names had been changed to insult each other. For example, Cloud Zhongmu's real name was Cloud Zhongmu, and Magic Pig's real name wasn't Magic Pig, but Magic Words. When Magic Words finished speaking, she waved her hand. 4 thieves jumped out and chased after Gu Fei and 100 Eras Jingren. Cloud Zhongmu was a bad guy. When he saw Magic Words' actions, he knew that she didn't know Gu Fei and 100 Eras Jingren. When they saw that the two wanted to leave, they thought that they were afraid of them. The more they thought about it, the more they wanted to kill them to ruin Cloud Zhongmu's reputation. Actually, if it weren't for the fact that Yin Zhongmu knew the strength of those two, he wouldn't be able to think of any other explanation for the two of them leaving just like that. Anyway, seeing that Mei Yan was digging her own grave, Yin Zhongmu was secretly delighted. However, he still put on a serious face and said, "If you need me for something, don't make things difficult for my friend." Cloud Zhongmu hadn't been the guild leader for a long time for nothing. He had learned to be cunning in the process of interacting with countless people. He knew that the more he said this, the more his opponents would go against him. They might not be interested in killing 2 more people, but if Cloud Zhongmu didn't want them to do something, they would happily do it. This was the mentality of opponents who hated themselves. "Take care of yourself first." Magic Words shouted in a low voice. She led the other 3 and surrounded Cloud Zhongmu. He had a good understanding of Cloud Zhongmu's strength. Although he was one of the 5 roaches, the 4 on his side weren't weak either. 4 against 1 was enough. He understood this, but so did Cloud Zhongmu. He naturally wouldn't choose to fight these 4 head-on. Moreover, he was looking forward to a good show. Cloud Zhongmu didn't advance. Instead, he retreated and took a roundabout route. Magic Words laughed coldly. "Cloud Zhongmu, what are you doing? This isn't like you." Based on his understanding of Cloud Zhongmu, he wouldn't retreat in a situation where death was certain. Killing 1 was worth it, and killing 2 was worth it. Could it be that now that you've become one of the 5 roaches, you're starting to value your level more? Magic Words' eyes lit up. The more precious something was to Cloud Zhongmu, the happier he was to destroy it. Cloud Zhongmu didn't reply. As he ran, he looked in Gu Fei's direction. What he saw stunned him. Magic Words was also paying attention to his movements. When she saw the direction he was looking in and the dull look in his eyes, she felt very satisfied. She immediately turned her head and said, "So fast." "Yeah, so fast," Cloud Zhongmu said. It really was too fast. Cloud Zhongmu wanted to take some time to watch the show, but when he turned his head, the 4 thieves were already gone. Gu Fei and 100 Eras strategist turned around and stood there, looking at them. "Huh, you haven't done anything yet?" Magic Words said. Cloud Zhongmu glanced at him and thought, what kind of nonsense is this guy spouting? Magic Words wasn't talking nonsense. He wasn't surprised that he didn't see the 4 thieves because they were thieves. It was normal for them to be in stealth when they attacked. But he quickly came to his senses. They had just been hit by white lime, and his stealth was still on cooldown. Those 4 guys definitely couldn't use stealth right now, but they were gone. This. Magic Words opened her mouth wide, her expression incredulous. Cloud Zhongmu saw this and felt very satisfied. This was the effect he wanted. Qianli's drunk and 100 Eras strategist didn't disappoint him. Gu Fei originally didn't want to interfere, but these 4 thieves arrogantly came up to challenge him. How could Gu Fei be polite to them? He raised his hand and killed 3 of them. The 4th one realized that something was wrong and wanted to retreat, but 100 Eras strategist taught him a combo, and he died miserably. 100 Eras strategist was now completely enlightened. He used the Gu family's dragon fist in PvP, which was very ruthless. At this moment, Gu Fei was hesitating. Since the other side had come to him, Should he take care of the other four as well? Then he saw that the four of them didn't move and just stared blankly at him, and 100 Era's strategist. Ahem. Gu Fei cleared his throat and asked, "Are you coming?" "What?" Magic Words was shocked. "Do you want to fight?" Gu Fei asked. "Fight what?" Magic Words said. "Don't you want to fight us too?" Gu Fei said. Magic Words would be too stupid if she still couldn't tell that these two weren't easy to deal with. After hesitating for a while, she finally plucked up her courage and asked, "Can I go back on my word?" "Ha ha ha ha." Cloud Zhongmu laughed. "You can take it easy. Magic Pig, you're really a man." Magic Words knew that she had kicked an iron plate today. However, she was also confused as to why these two were so strong. Why did they hide? Although Magic Words was the one who spoke first, the 8 of them were actually about the same strength. If the 4 of them were killed in an instant, the 4 of them definitely wouldn't be any better. At this time, the 4 brothers who were killed sent a message. Dual Flame Flash, instant kill. Once these words were said, any player with a bit of curiosity would know who this person was. Magic Words' eyes widened. You're Qianli drunk? Yes. Gu Fei nodded his head in a plain manner, as natural as when he said, "You're busy, we'll go first." At this moment, Magic Words knew that his actions were basically suicidal. Qianli drunk. Back then, he single-handedly destroyed the entire guild of the former dust. Rumors were scary. There was already such a version of what happened back then. I still have something to do today. Cloud Zhongmu Pig, I'll deal with you another day. Magic Words said as she prepared to leave. At first glance, this seemed very childish, but it was actually a smart move. After learning that her opponent was a strong person like Qianli Drunk, Magic Words immediately realized that Qianli Drunk couldn't have left because he was afraid, but because he simply didn't want to get involved. Then he asked if she wanted to fight or not. With this kind of attitude, she might have a chance to live if she chose not to fight. If she could avoid death, she would not die. This was Magic Words' style. From this, it could be seen that he was completely different from Cloud Zhongmu. The two of them didn't like each other for no reason. Apart from the matter, it was also because of the conflict between their personalities. Magic Words' gamble paid off. At this time, he wanted to leave dejectedly, so Gu Fei didn't make things difficult for them. In reality, this was also Gu Fei's attitude towards PvP. If the opponent admitted defeat and wanted to leave, he wouldn't make things difficult for them under normal circumstances. Unless he had the intention to kill his opponent from the very beginning, such as when his target was Non-Smiler, Jian Nanyu, and the others, or perhaps when he was helping Reigning the Four Seas complete his mission during the mercenary competition. There was a reason for this, so he naturally had to make a different judgment. Gu Fei ignored Charming Words as she ran away. Cloud Twilight didn't chase after her either. He had already called for his brothers who were leveling up in the valley to come and help him. But Charming Words had provoked Gu Fei and ended up in such a state. Cloud Zhongmu found it funny. He told his brothers not to come over and thanked Gu Fei. "We were just defending ourselves," Gu Fei said. "That guy Sai." Cloud Zhongmu shook his head. "Who was he?" Gu Fei couldn't help but ask. "He used to be in our guild, but something happened and he left the guild." "He's always been with me," Cloud Zhongmu said helplessly. How could an alliance of over 4,000 people be as harmonious as an iron board? Cloud Zhongmu didn't have so much trouble when he was in a small guild. Now he finally knew that a big guild wasn't necessarily happy. "These people are a bit strange," Gu Fei said. "Oh, what's wrong?" Cloud Zhongmu asked. Chapter 649. How did they know you were here and purposely came here to ambush you? Gu Fei said. Cloud Twilight was a bit embarrassed, but he still told the truth. Our 10 Guild Alliance has a total of 4,000 brothers, but there are people from other guilds among them. We've noticed this a few times during guild PvP. However, there's no way to find out who they are, so we can only let them be. It looks like Mei Yan has a mole in the guild. Everyone in the guild knows that we invited you guys here to teach us efficient leveling methods. This guy probably heard about it and came to ambush me. This bastard has done this a few times already. If he knew so clearly, then he should have thought that you wouldn't be alone. However, he only came with 8 people. This kind of arrangement doesn't seem like he's going to ambush a team. It seems like he thinks that you're here alone. Gu Fei said. Cloud Twilight was startled. After thinking about it carefully, he also felt that something wasn't right. This guy brought 8 thieves with him. From the looks of it, it seemed like he was ready to take a bite and leave. However, Mei Yan was someone who left the guild. Both sides knew each other very well. If he didn't think that Cloud Twilight was alone, he definitely wouldn't have used this kind of tactic. This was because Cloud Morning's team often had people with anti-stealth skills. Sending 8 thieves as a team was tantamount to suicide. Cloud Twilight furrowed his eyebrows and began to think. If he had a mole, then even if he wanted to ambush me, he wouldn't have made this kind of arrangement. If he didn't have a mole, then he shouldn't know where I am. Could it be that this guy is just passing by and is actually here to level up? From the looks of it, it doesn't seem like he's just passing by and coincidentally bumping into you, Gu Fei said. That's true. What kind of 8 thieves would come out to level together? What the hell is this bastard doing? I'm afraid he's not the one behind this, Gu Fei said. Brother Qianli, what do you mean? Cloud Twilight hurriedly asked. You just said it yourself. If he had information, then he wouldn't have come. If he didn't, then he shouldn't have come. But now that he's here, there's only one explanation. He received false information, Gu Fei said. Are the two of you talking about tongue twisters? Master of the 100 Eras was puzzled. No one paid any attention to him. False information? Yin Zhongmu mumbled. Could it be that someone framed this grandson? That I'm not sure. Perhaps it's a trap, or perhaps it's a use. Gu Fei said. Use. Woo, this idiot being used like a spear really is his style. Cloud and Twilight muttered. Anyway, be careful. We'll be leaving first. Gu Fei patted him on the back. He guessed that this was an internal conflict between guilds in Moonlit City. Take care. Cloud and Twilight didn't send them off again. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Gu Fei's words made sense. Someone was probably behind this. As for the purpose of tricking Mei Yan, Cloud and Twilight didn't know, and even more so, he didn't know who was behind this. Half of the guilds in Moonlit City had conflicts with the 10 Guilds Alliance, especially the bigger ones. Gu Fei and Master of the 100 Eras and Cloud and Twilight parted ways at the entrance of the valley. The two returned to the city, and Cloud and Twilight went back into the valley. Inside the valley, a group of players who hadn't eaten dinner were still practicing like a raging fire. Cloud and Twilight went over and dragged a few of them off the field. He told them what he had just experienced. Strategist, what do you think? Cloud and Twilight asked a mage among the brothers. This strategist's name was the first strategist, so it was easy to tell what this player liked. It didn't matter if the idea was good or bad. This guy could come up with ideas for anything. It was no wonder he was called a burning bun. Although the success rate of his ideas wasn't high, Cloud and Twilight and the others were used to letting him speak first when they discussed things. Everyone had come up with such a name. They had to give him some face. The first strategist immediately cleared his throat and said, There's no doubt that someone is behind this. I think it's either Mixed Hair or Proud Egg. Mixed Hair and Proud Egg were the leaders of the 2 level 5 guilds in Moonlit City. It must have been hard for these two to be able to build 2 such large guilds in Moonlit City, where the 10 Guilds Alliance could do whatever they wanted. Now that they were working together, they were the leaders of the farmers in Moonlit City against the 10 Guilds Alliance. Mixed Hair and Proud Egg were called the same as Cloud and Twilight. In fact, these 2 players were called Weeds and Proud Emperor, but in Cloud and Twilight's mouth, one was called Mixed Hair, and the other was called Egg. Can you say something useful? Cloud Twilight rolled his eyes. When he realized that someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes, he immediately thought of these 2 as their guild's greatest enemies. However, this was also the style of a strategist. His plans had always been shallow and superficial. Everyone could think of them. Yes, as for what these 2 grandsons want to do, I still have to think about it. The first strategist said, Okay, think on the side. Cloud and Twilight waved his hand and looked at the other brothers. They were the ones who really came up with ideas. I think they're here for this, right? One of the brothers pouted at the child elite group in Jian Nanyu, who were leveling up. Of course, he wasn't referring to these people, but the efficient leveling method they represented. Outside of secluded Night Valley, Gu Fei and 100 Realms Jingluan were rushing back to the main city, but they were stopped halfway. Gu Fei thought that charming words had gathered people to take revenge, and was about to defend himself. However, the leader of the other party came up to them with a smile. Sorry for disturbing you too. Let me introduce myself. I am the guild leader of Moonlit Night City's Proud Sky Guild, Proud Emperor. This is the guild leader of Miscellaneous Things, Weeds. I have something to discuss with you too. Is it convenient for you too? Gu Fei was a bit disappointed when he heard that it wasn't a fight. However, he obviously wouldn't be so unreasonable as to reject Qianli just because he was in a hurry to eat dinner. He immediately said, "What is it?" "Haha, it's like this. Didn't you two recently set up a studio to teach efficient leveling methods? We're here for that, and we have something to discuss with you too," Proud Emperor said. Gu Fei heard this and laughed. "Which leveling area do you want?" Proud Emperor smiled. "All of them." Hearing this, Gu Fei was stunned. "All of them?" Proud Emperor nodded. "All of them. It means all of the leveling areas in the game." Gu Fei and 100 Realms Jingluan looked at each other. They didn't understand what this person meant. "Haha, actually, I was just talking about our identity as players in the game. I have another identity that I haven't introduced to you too. Here's my name card." Proud Emperor reached into his pocket and took out 2 badge-like things. Gu Fei and 100 Realms Jingluan took them in confusion. They realized that it was a name card made of an unknown material. The words on it were carved. Ingqi Workshop Moonlit Night City Branch Manager, Proud Emperor. There was also an email address. Other than that, there was no other complicated information. In-game, an ID was enough, and an email address was for offline contact when needed. Ingqi Workshop. Gu Fei frowned and said, "I think I've heard of it somewhere. Do you know?" Gu Fei turned his head and asked 100 Realms Jingluan. "I don't know." 100 Realms Jingluan immediately shook his head. He and Gu Fei were noobs in the game. Proud Emperor smiled and said, "When we were in Shady Forest City, our branch had some dealings with you, Brother Qianli." Hearing Proud Emperor's words, Gu Fei immediately remembered it. Their camouflage equipment had come from this studio when they were dealing with Deepwater in Shady City. At that time, he and the Sword Ghost had even stayed in their clothing workshop with Lu Ke. No wonder it sounds familiar. Gu Fei smiled and put the name card and badge in his pocket. Proud Emperor stared and wanted to say something, but in the end, he held back. It wasn't easy to carve out such an exquisite badge in the game. Proud Emperor's name card was actually given to people to see, and when people exclaimed, "Wow, Ingqi Studio," he would take the opportunity to take the name card back. In fact, it wasn't a gift. In the end, not only were they unable to use their great name to boost their prestige, their name cards were confiscated by Gu Fei instead. Furthermore, 100 Eras Jingluan followed suit, and also put away his name cards. The Proud Emperor lost 2 of his name cards at once, which made him feel very distressed. "Why are you looking for us from the studio?" Gu Fei asked. I don't know what the 2 of you think about the future of this efficient leveling method," Proud Emperor said. "The future is not bad." Gu Fei's answer was equivalent to not answering. Hee, of course the future is good." Proud Emperor continued to smile and said, "It's just that according to your current operating model, it's a bit hard to say whether you can maximize its potential." "Really? Why do you say that?" Gu Fei asked. Proud Emperor saw that Gu Fei's interest had been aroused, and immediately began to explain with great spirit. "Then I'll tell you the truth. There's nothing wrong with your operating model, but you have a fatal flaw, which is the lack of manpower. This has led to the fact that although you have infinite resources in your hands, you are unable to spread them to the entire game market in one go. At present, you have only developed the 2 leveling areas of Baishur Wilderness Camp and White Mill. This slow pace really has a lot of hidden dangers." Proud Emperor paused and looked at Gu Fei, but did not see the anxious expression on his face because of the hidden dangers. Slightly disappointed, he could only continue. "First of all, let me make an analogy. The first to master the efficient leveling method and the players who have not yet mastered the efficient leveling method. These two groups are actually equivalent to two groups that have a gap between the rich and the poor. The contradiction between these two groups is absolutely impossible to reconcile. In the end, the common point of this contradiction can only be the source of this contradiction. Of course, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the efficient leveling method, because this situation can be avoided, but unfortunately, you don't have enough manpower, leading to this contradiction that is not conducive to further development. And according to my observation, there is another kind of contradiction that has arisen, that is mastering the efficient leveling method, but because the leveling area is saturated with people, they can't level in peace. This is also a factor that is not conducive to development, and similarly, if there is enough manpower, this situation can be avoided. Well, it makes sense. Gu Fei nodded. Proud Emperor seemed to be encouraged, very happy, and then said, "There is another point. I'm afraid it will come from the pressure of the game company." Although the efficient leveling method is completely developed by the players, to put it bluntly, it is a set of monster fighting guide, but according to my observation, it is actually a set of relatively mechanical monster fighting method. This kind of monster fighting method, at first because of the crazy increase in experience, but after getting used to it, the mechanical repetition of the method will greatly increase the fatigue, will produce a mentality of weariness, and will avoid leveling. Then the time to leave the game will not be too long. This is not something that the game company is willing to see. More importantly, the efficient leveling method speeds up the player's leveling speed. And the increase in the player leveling speed means that the game progress is faster. This also means that the game life is shortened. For example, the original plan for the players to reach level 50 in 2 years, because of the popularization of the efficient leveling method, the players reach level 50 in a year. Then in this extra year, what method will the game company use to attract the players to continue to struggle in the game? If there is no effective game content to attract the players, it will inevitably cause a large number of players to leave, so this will obviously increase the work pressure and burden of the game company. Therefore, this kind of thing that destroys the rhythm of the game, they will definitely not sit idly by. I reckon that at present, they should already be secretly evaluating this efficient leveling method. Once it is confirmed that it is harmful, they will definitely think of a way to eliminate it by hook or by crook. This is a business that cannot be done slowly, it needs to be quiet, then amazing the world with a single brilliant feat. Once we make a move, we will spread the efficient leveling method to the entire game, and achieve the maximum benefit in one go. This way, even if the game company makes any adjustments, our loss of profit will already be minimized. But if we continue to operate like you do now, it will be fine now, but when 2 or 3 more leveling areas are opened, the game company will definitely make a move. At that time we can only watch as a large amount of business disappear. This time, Proud Emperor did not pause, and finished his speech in one breath. This was the longest speech that Gu Fei had ever heard since he entered the game. He looked at 100-era statesman beside him, as if he was about to fall asleep listening to it. Proud Emperor saw that the two of them were a little dazed, and thought that they were shocked by his wonderful long speech. Licking his somewhat dry lips, he said with a desire to continue, There's still more?" Gu Fei was shocked. When Proud Emperor saw his reaction, it seemed that he could no longer listen to it, and hurriedly changed his words. There are still a few minor things that need not be said too much. In short, just these few hidden dangers are enough to cause the efficient leveling method to be unable to make the best use of it. I believe that the two of you can't bear to see your great talent being unable to display it because of a moment of carelessness, right? All of this can actually be avoided, as long as there is enough manpower. Proud Emperor's spittle flew everywhere, and his face was full of bitter resentment, as if the efficient leveling method was handed over to Gu Fei and the others to casually operate. It would destroy the earth. "Thank you for your concern," Gu Fei said with a smile. "Not at all. I just can't bear to see the two of you inadvertently ruin such a great opportunity to make money." Proud Emperor said. "Money? We're talking about making money?" 100 Lives strategist was flabbergasted. Proud Emperor's long speech was too unconventional for someone who didn't understand the game. Even Gu Fei was a little confused. let alone 100 Lives strategist who was a little rigid. After hearing 100 Lives strategist's words, Proud Emperor was also very frightened. He was really afraid that after saying so much, the two of them didn't listen to him at all. So he hurriedly said, "Brother 100 Lives strategist, didn't hear it clearly? Do you want me to repeat it again?" "No need," Gufei hurriedly said. He saw that 100 Lives strategist was almost about to nod, but fortunately his mouth was fast enough. "Then, what do the two of you think?" Proud Emperor felt that Gufei was quite understanding. Perhaps he already understood his intentions. There was no need to say too much. "And we're leaving, goodbye," Gufei said. Proud Emperor was stunned. What was the meaning of this? Did he not express himself clearly enough? Proud Emperor blankly glanced at the weeds beside him. The weeds and he were both members of Ingenious Studio, and they were official employees. According to the company's position, they were Proud Emperor's assistants. This time, the higher-ups attached great importance to the leveling method, and the branches in the main cities were also actively thinking of ways to obtain it. This time, Proud Emperor personally brought along his assistant. He was determined to get it. Otherwise, if it wasn't such a big deal, his identity as a studio member wouldn't be easily exposed. Who would have thought that after spending so much time talking, these two fellows didn't seem to understand. They didn't even understand what he was saying. Proud Emperor was currently in a bad mood. Looking at the weeds beside him, he suddenly felt that this guy didn't even come up to help him when he was working hard to obtain the business. He was really angry, completely forgetting that he was the one who told the weeds not to talk too much. The relationship between these two wasn't like the relationship between a guild leader and a guild member. It was a true relationship between a superior and a subordinate. The weeds saw that the leader's expression wasn't good, as if he was going to take it out on him. Even though he was cursing in his heart, he had no choice but to take the initiative to find something to do. He hurriedly chased after Gufei and 100 Era's Jingluan. "Please wait a moment. Is there anything else?" Gufei asked. "The two of you don't seem to understand what we mean." The weeds looked down on Proud Emperor. He clearly wanted to poach people over, but he pretended to be high and mighty, letting others understand his intention to cooperate. But in the end, they didn't understand, and he had to fix it himself. The weeds felt depressed, so he went straight to the point. "Actually, what we mean is you have the technology, we have the manpower, it's simply a match made in heaven. We can develop the leveling method to the maximum. How great would that be?" Gufei scratched his head. "I understand what you guys mean, but you guys don't seem to understand what I mean." "What do you mean?" The weeds was confused. "I said we're leaving, goodbye. What I mean is, I'm not interested in this cooperation," Gufei said. "Why?" the weeds said. Gufei smiled. "I'm a grandmaster of combat, not a professional gamer." Chapter 650. Grandmaster of Combat? Weed was confused. "Aren't you a mage?" Weed used an appraisal spell to confirm that he was a mage. Gufei shook his head. "I'm not interested in making money in the game. I don't need it either." Weed smiled. The professional gamers in their studio knew that normal people didn't see them as a proper profession. In reality, the online gaming industry was booming. Gaming studios that relied on online gaming to survive were already an important part of the entertainment industry. They entered the game and used the resources in the game to covet the players' wallets. The monthly profits weren't as bad as normal people thought. Although in the early days some studios only cared about profits, wantonly infiltrating the game and destroying the economic environment in the game, which also had a lot of negative effects on the game. As the industry became more and more formal, this business method of killing the goose that laid the golden eggs had long been eliminated. Studios nowadays hoped for a harmonious environment in the game more than the players. This was especially so for a famous studio like Inga. They were a proper company with a legal business license. They even had to pay a high fee to the game company to enter certain games. It could be seen that even the game company recognized the studio after it entered the standard path. We'd had heard many of Gufei's words. They were all old-fashioned and old jokes. He had no idea that the online gaming studio industry had a bright future. This was especially so in a brand new game environment like the parallel world. The players' needs in the game were even more plentiful, and there were countless ways for studios to earn money. It was no longer the simple and boring methods of farming gold, farming materials, or opening up gold groups in the earlier online games. The lime industry in Whitestone City, the private boat industry in Waterside City, and the lantern and torch industry in Xiaowu City were all flourishing. Previously, we'd had met a guy who thought that his income was high enough to be a pay-to-win player in the game. However, after asking him, he found out that the guy's income wasn't even comparable to that of a porter who sold white lime in Age's studio. From then on, the weeds were even more confident. Those people who didn't think much of them, as long as they brought out their studio's income account, it would be enough to shock them. How much business was this efficient leveling method? Would the number one assassin in the parallel world pee his pants if he told them the profit he estimated? These thoughts flashed through Weed's mind. He decided to tell them a number to shock the two bumpkins. He said casually, "Hee hee, do you think anyone would complain about having too much money? Just play some games and earn a few million yuan of pocket money from him. Why would the two of you refuse?" Before Gu Fei could say anything, 100 Generations Jinglin patted his pocket and said, "It's only a few million gold coins. I already have it." This guy took the money that Gu Fei didn't want from the last deal. Together with his previous income, he had more than 1,000,000 gold coins. 100 Era's strategist was proud of himself, but the other party thought that he was indeed a country bumpkin. Then, with a disapproving look, he lightly said, "I'm not talking about gold coins, I'm talking about RMB. RMB. 100 Generations Jinglin opened his mouth. A few million RMB was like a dream to him. Weed was very satisfied with Encyclopedic Statesman's reaction. He thought to himself that Encyclopedic Statesman was indeed a guy who had never seen the world. He could be scared by just a few million. It seemed that the profit of a studio was indeed unimaginable to ordinary people. Even the 5 strongmen were no better than this. We'd wondered how Slim Waist Dance, who was known as the number one pay-to-win player, would react in the face of such a situation. As We'd thought about it, he stole a glance at Gu Fei. He was a little annoyed when he saw that Gu Fei was still smiling calmly. He felt that Gu Fei was pretending to be reserved, so he decided to add fuel to the fire. He said, I'm actually quite conservative with this number. After all, we haven't really cooperated yet, so we haven't done detailed market research. However, let's make a rough estimate. There are currently more than 50 million players in the parallel world. As long as we promote the efficient leveling method to 10% of them, that would be 5 million players. According to your current price of 99 gold coins per person, that would be 495 million gold coins. The gold coin market has been quite stable recently, and we set the price of 100 gold coins at 30 yuan. So 495 million gold coins would be 148. 5 million. 148. 5 million. 100 Reincarnation Jingluan sucked in a cold breath. It's RMB. We'd reminded him again. What's going on? 100 Generations Jinglin didn't have enough brain power to process it. You started a small business with a few buddies, but at this time, a big company is optimistic about the prospects of your exclusive business, so they want to merge with you and expand the business. Is this what you mean? Gu Fei explained and asked the Weeds. That's right. Something like that. Weed nodded. He had calculated a number of over 100 million just now, but Qianli didn't seem to have any reaction even though he was drunk. That made him feel a little uneasy. Can't he be moved by such a huge number? What's his background? 148. 5 million. 100 Generations Jinglin was still mumbling. I don't need that much. You wish. That's the final income of the entire project, and we don't know how many people will get a share of it. Gu Fei asked Weed. If we split it, how much will he get? Weed immediately came to a realization. Is this guy putting on an act because he hasn't decided on how to split the profits? Unfortunately, Weed couldn't decide how to split the profits, and he didn't dare to say anything for fear that it would affect the future negotiations. At this time, the higher-ups naturally needed to step in. Although Proud Emperor was only the person in charge of the Moonlit Night City branch, he still had some authority to carry out his business. At this moment, he didn't rashly make a promise, but said calmly, "If the two of you are interested, why don't we sit down and talk about it slowly? There's a barbecue shop on the 4th Street of Moonlit Night City, and the environment is not bad. Why don't we go there and talk about it while we eat?" Currently, the food in the game was still mainly meat barbecue. Although there were many types of frying, cooking, the ingredients needed were also very complicated. How could there be such things in the game? Many players were already tired of eating barbecue, and were clamoring to eat cumin-flavored ones. This really stumped countless barbecue experts. Countless culinary experts went into the wild forest to taste the weeds, hoping to chew cumin-flavored ones. "Now, we haven't eaten yet," Gufei said. "Isn't this the right time to eat?" Proud Emperor said. "I'm not talking about the game." Gufei wiped his sweat. Communicating with this group of players was really troublesome, and they took the game too seriously. "Oh, I see. Then the two of you should go eat first, and we'll contact each other later, okay?" Proud Emperor didn't force them. At first, Qianli was drunk, and was about to walk away, but after hearing such a large number, he didn't bring up the matter of refusing. Once he loosened his mouth, the next thing would be the problem of profit distribution. While this guy went to eat, he could negotiate with the higher-ups and ask what the bottom line was. As Proud Emperor talked to the two, he kept calculating in his heart. Proud Emperor and Weeds weren't wrong about one thing. In terms of the game, Gufei and 100 Realms Jingren were indeed country bumpkins, and they didn't expect a studio to be able to make so much money. Gufei had dealt with Remnant Dreams group of people from afar, and Wandering Swords group of 7. They seemed to be working hard, and their income didn't seem to be very prosperous. However, looking at these two guys in front of him, their tone and confidence were really different from Wandering Swords group. Could this be the difference between a big company and a small workshop? After the two added each other as friends, Gufei and 100 Realms Jingren continued to discuss this matter on the way back to the city. When they reached the revival point, they both went offline. Gufei hurriedly ate a meal, rested for a while, and then returned to the game. 100 Realms Jingren was even more anxious than him, and was already waiting in the game. At this moment, he was at the revival point, waiting for Gufei to come online. "You're finally here. I was about to go offline to call you," 100 Realms Jingren said. "You have my number?" Gufei was puzzled. "Ask your dad," 100 Realms Jingren said. "Oh, what about them? Did you contact them?" Gufei returned to the main topic. "They greeted me, and I said I'll wait for you. They said they'll go to that barbecue shop on that street, and they'll wait there. Do you know how to get there?" 100 Realms Jingren asked. "If I don't know, why don't you ask?" Gufei randomly grabbed a player, and after asking for directions to the 4th Street, he set off with 100 Realms Jingren. On the 4th Street of Moonlit Night City, Ingqi's barbecue shop was also a relatively famous place. When the two of them walked onto the street, they saw the very eye-catching barbecue flag. As they walked over, they sent a message to Proud Emperor. "We're here." The door of the barbecue shop immediately opened, and the two of them saw Weed walking out and looking around. The two of them hurriedly waved their hands and hurriedly caught up. Weed's expression seemed to be far less excited than before, and when it saw the two of them coming over, it faintly said, "Please come in." Then it led the way. The barbecue shop was filled with the smell of barbecue and all kinds of red wine. This kind of eating and drinking at the same time was much more popular than the tavern, and the business was really good. Gufei looked up and glanced at the price list on the wall. On it, there were frightening names such as Grassland Wild Boar, Horned Wolf, Three-Eared Gray Rabbit, Red-Tail Snake, and other frightening names. Behind the meat, there was not only the price, but also the monster's level. The higher the level, the more expensive the price. It turned out that the people here weren't actually eating the meat, but the level. Ingqi and the owner of the tavern in Cloud City, Little Ray, were both smart, and had even set up a private room outside of the main hall. However, it was clear that Ingqi had more people, and the overall layout of the barbecue shop was clearly meticulously designed. Unlike Little Ray's bar that dared to open with a table and a few stools, the style of the entire shop was different from the taverns that players most often came into contact with, and it let people know what it was for as soon as they walked in. The head of weeds led the way, and brought the two to a private room in the corner. When Gu Fei entered, not only was Ao Huang inside, there was also another player. On the other hand, Ao Huang's complexion was just as gloomy as the weeds. However, when he saw Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingluan coming in, he immediately raised his face and smiled warmly. "You two have come, please take a seat." "Okay." Gu Fei nodded and sat side by side with Bai Jingluan. Ao Huang and Weed sat opposite of them, and the new player sat in the main seat. "The two of you." The person also took the initiative to greet them. "Let me introduce myself. I am the director of Yingqi Studio, Cloud City, Moonlit Night, White Stone, Red Rock, Sunset Rain, and Bright Dawn." "Oh, hello." Gu Fei and Bai Jingluan greeted the person. At this moment, Gu Fei caught a flash of disdain in the eyes of Ao Huang and Weeds when Wu Yi introduced himself, and immediately understood. This studio was really systematized. It was obvious that if Ao Huang and Weeds could sign this deal, it would be an amazing achievement in their hands. Bonuses and promotions were all possible because of this. Wu Yi claimed to be the director of the 6 cities, and it seemed that he was Ao Huang's direct superior. At this time, he actually interfered, and it was obvious that he wanted to steal the credit of his subordinates. No wonder Ao Huang and Weeds showed their dissatisfaction on their faces. This kind of power struggle within the company was the same as the disputes between guilds in the game. It was a mess, and it was impossible to distinguish between right and wrong. Ao Huang and the Weed were currently looking down on Wu Ye's actions, but who knew if they would also do the same thing when faced with such a huge transaction when they sat in this position. Most of the people who survived under a system would eventually be assimilated by the system. If they clenched their teeth and refused to adapt to the system, they would either be eliminated or become the main character. This unexpected discovery made Gu Fei realize that this cooperation was no longer the usual kind between players that ultimately served the purpose of entertainment. If they really wanted to negotiate such a huge deal, they might have to sign legal documents to restrict the behavior of both parties. Gu Fei didn't know much about games, but he still knew these common sense. I believe that Ao Huang and Weeds have already explained the prospects of the efficient leveling method to the two of you, right? Now I want to hear what both of you have to say. Everyone, don't be shy. Speak freely." Wu Yi didn't hesitate and immediately began to bluff. Moreover, his attitude was quite high. Although Gu Fei and Bai Jingluan had the technology to develop the efficient leveling method, Wu Yi believed that if they didn't have the promotion of the studio, it would be impossible for them to achieve the situation of the entire game by themselves. Although it was Yingqi who looked for the two of them first, it didn't mean that she was begging them. They couldn't complete this deal without the two of them. And similarly, the two of them couldn't display their full potential without them. Both sides were indispensable. It was inevitable that the two of them would raise the price if they were begging for cooperation. Therefore, Wu Yi first put on a high attitude to let the two of them realize the value of their studio, so that they wouldn't think too highly of themselves. At the same time, Wu Yi had another thought. How did Drunk Qianli and Bai Jingluan develop the efficient leveling method? If they could directly grasp the key to it, they could completely kick the two of them away. Even if the conditions were limited, they might be able to take the initiative. Wu Ye's idea wasn't wrong, but it was a pity that they didn't understand the thoughts and values of Gu Fei and Bai Jingluan, the two martial artists, which were different from ordinary people. Gu Fei didn't lack money at all, and his personal pursuit was spiritual rather than material. So no matter how much money he had, it wouldn't be tempting to him. On the other hand, although Bai Jingluan lacked money, his highest pursuit was also spiritual rather than material. Therefore, to him, enough money could be tempting, but no matter how much money he had, the temptation wouldn't be magnified. When he heard the number 148 million, Bai Jingluan said, "I don't need that much." Ordinary people might think that he was really silly, but in fact, it was the values of martial artists that led him to say such silly words. To them, satisfaction, happiness, and joy couldn't be bought with money, so what was the use of money? Money was just a means to ensure life. No matter how high Wu Ye's attitude was, could it be higher than Gu Fei's attitude of indifference? When he heard Wu Ye's question, he turned to look at Bai Jingluan. Gu Fei didn't have any pursuit, so when it came to practical matters, Bai Jingluan, who had needs, had to make the decision. As a result, Bai Jingluan gulped and looked a little nervous. He opened his mouth, but in the end he said to Gu Fei, "Say it." Was Gu Fei someone who dilly-dallied? Seeing that Bai Jingluan was going to entrust him with full authority, he didn't stand on ceremony. "We don't have any opinions. We just want to hear your conditions." "Conditions? Ha." Wu Yi laughed. He felt that the two of them really didn't know the art of negotiation at all. Weren't they showing their eagerness by being so direct? This kind of guy might be able to be bought off at a very low price. With that thought in mind, Wu Yi also began to give a long speech. After briefly describing how they operated, he began to pour out his grievances to the two. When winning people over, he boasted that his studio was unparalleled in the world. When it came to substantive negotiations, he kept saying the truth, making people feel that their studio was simply on the verge of collapse. There were many real and fake reasons, but in the end, it could be summed up in one sentence. We're in a difficult situation, and you have to understand that since we're cooperating, we should show sincerity. Now that we've sincerely offered a price, it's time for you to show your sincerity. At this time, if they were tricked, they would be too embarrassed to offer a higher price, as if offering a higher price would mean that they weren't sincere and had let the other party down. It would be like adding snow to snow and pushing the other party into a fire pit. After saying so much, Gu Fei turned his head and asked Bai Jingluan, "How much do you need?" "Wait, let me calculate. My current consumption of 3 meals a day, daily expenses." Bai Jingluan leaned on the table and calculated. Gu Fei despised him. "Fuck, should I ask how long you're going to live?" Chapter 651. Bai Jingluan was seriously calculating his daily expenses, including the expenses for visiting friends and family during festivals. At first, Wu Yi was a little annoyed. He felt that the two of them were making fun of him, but when he saw the serious look on 100 Reincarnation's face, he gradually began to have doubts in his heart. No way, this kid can't be serious, right? At that moment, Bai Jingluan raised his head and asked Gu Fei, "What's the bank's interest rate now?" "How would I know?" Gu Fei rolled his eyes. Wu Yi couldn't help but say, "Current period 0.36. That's so low." Bai Jingluan mumbled. "Death period is a little higher," Wu Yi said. "Oh. How much?" "That depends on which type. Lump sum deposit and withdrawal is higher, about 3, 6 and 5 years. Lump sum deposit and withdrawal is a little lower, about 2, 52 and 5 years. But it's much higher than current period," Wu Yi said. 5 years? That long? The period is not fixed, but the longer it is, the higher the interest rate. Lump sum deposit and withdrawal is at least 3 months, with an interest rate of 1.71. Wu Yi was quite familiar with these things in the bank, which made Bai Jingluan admire him very much. Gu Fei couldn't help but interrupt. "Who puts money in the bank for interest now? They're all buying stocks and funds. That's not safe, right? Now that prices are rising so fast, if money can't make money, it can only be put in less and less," Gu Fei said. From their views on money, it could be seen that it was not unreasonable for the Gu family to be rich and the Gu family to be poor. "I still think it's the safest to put it in the bank," Bai Jingluan said. "Look," Gu Fei had to analyze it for him patiently. "You're currently spending 10,000 a month on food, clothing, and accommodation. What about 10 years later? Will 10,000 a month be enough to eat and drink? Think back to 10 years ago, 20 years ago. How much was your family's monthly income? 10 years ago seems about the same, 20 years. Bai Jingluan's expression changed a little. 10 years felt like a natural increase, but the difference before and after 20 years was a little shocking. "You can't calculate it like that," Bai Jingluan said. "Right. I should calculate it at 50,000 per month. I have to consider 20 years later." The 100 Lives Classic scribbled on the paper and started again. Shit. Gu Fei didn't expect this guy to still want the bank's interest. He could only helplessly smile at Wu Yi. At this time, Wu Yi really believed that the Encyclopedia of Wisdom was serious. This guy actually wanted a sum of income. He put it in the bank and gave him 50,000 yuan of interest every month. Wu Yi didn't know which interest rate he was using. He craned his neck to take a peek and found that the guy was using the pitiful 0.36 interest rate for current deposits. Wuyi felt as if his vision had darkened. 50,000 monthly interest, that would be 600,000 a year. An interest rate of 0.36, that would be 166,666,666. It's endless. The vertical form on the 100 generations scripture linen paper just happened to show the result at this moment. Proud Emperor and Weeds weren't very enthusiastic about this project because their boss snatched the deal. At this time, when they heard the 100 Lives Classic's exorbitant demand, the two of them laughed at the side. They wanted to see how Wuyi would communicate with the other party. And this is a current deposit. I'll calculate it according to the death date. Bai Jingluan said. Is there a need to calculate it? The death date is 3, 6 and 5 years. Minus a 0, 16 million is enough. Gu Fei said. But we still have to use the money. We can't save it all for the death date. And let me calculate again. What's there to calculate? Take 16 million for the death date, and take a few million for daily expenses. Gu Fei said. Daily expenses needed a few million. What kind of tone was this? Wuyi was a little speechless. Previously, when this guy was calculating living expenses, he held back and didn't say anything. Daily expenses for a month was 10,000. What kind of daily expenses was this? Was there anyone who was so blatant in front of people? Wuyi was a little angry just thinking about it. However, he didn't know that the 100 Lives Classic was very honest. The daily expenses of martial arts practitioners were indeed so fierce. Moreover, 10,000 was the number in the heart of a guy like Bai Jingluan who was born in a poor family. If it were Gu Fei calculating it, it wouldn't be a problem even if he hired a private doctor, a massage therapist, a nutritionist, and so on. And in this case, I think 20 million N should be enough, Bai Jingluan said. At this time Gu Fei, who was born in a rich family, began to show off and nitpick. 10,000 is very ordinary daily expenses. If you want to improve yourself, money is a necessary solid backing. Wuyi finally couldn't bear it anymore and said weakly. Brother, he didn't calculate 10,000 a month but 50,000. It's called 50,000 now. After 10 or 20 years, it will be the same as 10,000. The older we get, the more money we need to take care of our body. Look at my dad's spirit. Do you think he got it from eating coarse grains every day? Nutrition is about matching. You're young now and you don't pay attention to it. After a few years, if your diet isn't healthy, your body will decline very seriously. My dad's daily expenses are more than mine. Aren't you teaching in school now? Why do you pay attention to what you eat? Bai Jingluan asked. I have a nutritionist's recipe. I eat according to the recipe. Don't tell me I'm eating from roadside stalls, Gu Fei said. Bai Jingluan was extremely ashamed. He just went offline and ate a bowl of knife-shaved noodles on the roadside. He immediately said, When can I take a look at your recipe? It's fine to take a look, but don't eat randomly. It's specially made according to my body's condition, and it's not always the same recipe. I check my body regularly, and it will be changed according to my body's condition, Gu Fei said. Even Wuyi was stunned by what he said. He couldn't see where Gu Fei came from at all. He felt like he was a first-class protected animal by the country, such as a panda or something. Bai Jingluan also felt a bit depressed after hearing too much. They were both martial artists, but the gap was too big. His innate talent was inferior to the other person's. He ate the roadside knife-shaved noodles and added meat when he was in a good mood. How could he compare to others? It was no wonder that he couldn't beat him. However, Bai Jingluan was a bit discouraged by Gu Fei's high demand. He looked at the paper that was full of calculations and said, According to what you said, this amount of money is really a drop in the bucket. At this time, Gu Fei also realized that he had gone a little overboard. Originally, he just wanted the encyclopedic statesman to have some money to focus on practicing martial arts. At the very least, he wouldn't have to go out and be a bodyguard or coach for a living. Why did he use him as a reference? He quickly changed his words. That's all in the future. Now we need to make a lot of money first. At least we don't have to run out to be a bodyguard, right? That's right. Bai Jingluan suddenly realized, so he patted the paper and said, then 20 million. Is that okay? Yes, it's okay. Gu Fei nodded. This time he didn't dare to say anything more, afraid that Bai Jingluan's would be depressed again. The two of them directly discussed the price in front of the other party, making it hard to tell if there was any room for negotiation. Wu Yi was at a loss and was silent. After the two of them decided on the price, they looked at him at the same time. What's the matter? Wu Yi looked at him and asked. Gu Fei was surprised. Didn't you ask us to name a price? We've discussed it, 20 million. You two. Wu Yi sighed. It turned out that the words he used to pour out his grievances didn't work at all. Even in front of him, he reckoned out a price without any hesitation. Thinking about it, Wu Yi shook his head and said, I've been listening to the two of you calculate the bill just now. I think the two of you are mistaken about something. Brother, how much you need for living expenses is actually completely unrelated to how much we can pay you with this deal. If we want to calculate the bill, we should also calculate how much money we can earn from this deal, right? He calculated it. The encyclopedic classics pointed at the weeds. 148 million. Wu Yi smiled. It was obvious that he had already learned about this from Weed, and was mentally prepared. At this time he said unhurriedly, that's just a rough calculation. Before there is scientific market analysis and evaluation as evidence, it can only be used as a reference. We are actually bearing a lot of risks in this matter. For now, we still don't know the attitude of the game company towards this efficient leveling method. Think about it, if halfway through our project, the game company takes some major measures to eliminate the use of efficient leveling methods, won't we lose everything? Hearing this, Gu Fei smiled. Impossible. Unless the game company finds real people to play as the small monsters, we have a way to develop efficient leveling methods for small monsters. Gu Fei didn't take it for granted when he said this. After discovering the efficient leveling method, he also did more in-depth research on it. It wasn't just in terms of martial arts, he also thought about how to eliminate this phenomenon on behalf of the game company. That was because Gu Fei actually hoped that the small monsters could be like real people, with unpredictable routines. In this way, would Gu Fei still need to find people to PK? It would be great to kill monsters every day. In the end, he also looked through a lot of information and asked some relevant talents. He knew that with the current technology, although it still couldn't be completely simulated, it could at least make more complicated attack routines. The problem was in the area of online games. The server's carrying capacity and the network's data transmission capacity had to be considered. If every small monster was really raised to the limit, a large number of complex calculations would lead to a strange situation in the game where the players didn't get stuck, but the small monsters would get stuck. Simulation technology and network technology weren't enough, causing the small monsters to only be like this in the area of online games. If it was a single-player game, it could be a bit stronger, but it wouldn't be much stronger. If the machine was completely like a human, the person that Gu Fei inquired about told him with certainty, don't count on it in your lifetime. Five Knights heard Gu Fei say it so firmly and was startled, but he couldn't refute it. He could only say, of course that's the best. But what I said before was actually the attitude of the game company. If the game company has a negative attitude towards the efficient leveling method, to be honest, a studio of our size can't participate in this kind of thing. So for us, this matter is actually walking on the edge of a knife. There are edges on both sides, and if we're not careful, we'll be cut. The risk is really quite high. Gu Fei scratched his head. You said so much, is 20 million okay or not? Too high. Five Knights shook his head. Then name a price. Gu Fei said. Five Knights gritted his teeth. 2 million, I can make the decision now. Even if we can't do it when the time comes, our studio can still afford this 2 million. Proud Emperor and Weeds couldn't help but admire their superior, directly cutting off a zero when bargaining. How much courage and how thick the skin of this person's face was. This is called a businessman. What do you want as profit? What's the use of face? If you want face, then you lose. 100 Lives Classics was the kind of person who cared about face very much. Hearing the other party speak so sincerely, it turned out that this could be a losing deal, but he was still willing to pay him 2 million. In a moment of impulse, he almost nodded. Fortunately, there was Gu Fei at the side, stopping him from speaking. He sneered at 5 knights. 2 million, are you joking? Just the white mill alone, we've already earned 2 million. Didn't you say that you want to promote it to the leveling area in the game? 2 million? 5 knights' expression didn't change, and his heart didn't skip a beat. He said doubtfully, "We've investigated the white mill leveling area. At that time, your students were divided into 4 groups, and each group had about 10,000 people. There were a total of 40,000 people. Your fee was 99 gold coins per person. Even if you received all of them, it would only be around 4 million gold coins. The 2 million you're talking about, is it in-game gold coins?" Gu Fei saw that the other party was smart and didn't get confused, so he nodded and said, "It's gold coins. According to your English exchange rate, it's 600,000 RMB. This is just a leveling area, and now you're using the leveling area in the game for 2 million? How many leveling areas are there in the game? I don't know much about the game, but I feel that there are at least 1,000. If you want to calculate it like this, 20 million is already too little. 2 million? 5 knights still didn't feel embarrassed at all, and laughed. "You can say it like this, but you can't calculate it like this, right?" "I think you can calculate it like this," Gu Fei said. "We only have 12 people, and we can already organize a leveling area to such a scale. With your studio's ability, do you think you'll lose to us?" "Brother, did you not understand what I meant just now? Our studio is registered in the game, and we don't have as much freedom as you normal players. If the game company really came out and told us not to do this, then we really can't continue doing this. But once we start this project, we have to pay the manpower and wages we invested. If we die prematurely, won't we lose money? And I'll tell you the truth, this efficient leveling method is very, very likely to be banned by the game company. If it wasn't for the huge hidden value hidden in it, we really wouldn't dare to touch it." Gu Fei couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. "Seeing that you're going all out, you can imagine how big the profits are. We have to ask for more, 30 million. Wu Yu was really a little angry, and he almost cursed out loud. However, in the end, he forced himself to control himself and continued to smile. "Brother, are you joking? You are trying to create pressure for me. I'm already carrying a debt of tens of millions. How are we going to do this business?" 5 knights said as he glared at Proud Emperor and Weeds. These 2 guys still said they were 2 country bumpkins, easy to scare, but they were obviously very difficult to deal with. Proud Emperor and Weeds also didn't understand why this guy suddenly became so shrewd. Could it be that they thought wrong of him from the beginning? The 3 of them were muttering in their hearts, when Gu Fei suddenly said, "Since 20 million is not enough, why don't we do this? You give me 2 million as a deposit first. Anyway, you can afford it. Then we'll sign a sharing agreement, and we'll split the profit in proportion. How about it?" 5 knights was slightly startled when he heard this, and he frowned. "If that's the case, this seems to be a safe method, but I don't know how much profit you want." 30%. 30%. 5 knights looked frightened. "Brother, our studio has so many mouths waiting to eat. This is such a big business, and you 2 only take 30%. Not to mention that the higher-ups won't agree. Even the brothers below will stab me in the back." "Is that so?" Gu Fei laughed. "Then tell me how much is suitable. If you give me another 2 million as unkind as before, I'll kill you immediately," Gu Fei said as he took out the Dark Knight streamer. He didn't have a good impression of these guys to begin with, and now that they were talking about it, he was getting a little annoyed. 100 Generations strategist felt the same. 5 knights was dumbfounded. How many times had they negotiated this business? Even if killing in the game wasn't against the law, he had never seen people directly threatening him with force. Moreover, dying in the game wasn't a big deal. Their studio's goal was money, not level. Such threats were useless. 5 knights was completely confused by Gu Fei, and he couldn't understand what he was thinking. However, it didn't seem like he was joking. It didn't matter if he was killed, but it meant that they were going to fall out, and the cooperation couldn't continue. Thinking of this, Wu Yi finally became honest for once. He stretched out 2 fingers and said, 20%. That's a lot. If we can reach the 140 million estimated by the weeds, you two will have 28 million in income, more than the 20 million you asked for. Of course, our goal is to make it as big as possible. For us, Inch Studio, limits don't exist. Gu Fei nodded. Then we'll need to sign a formal agreement, right? Of course, we're doing proper business. Please leave your offline contact details. I'll contact you as soon as possible. Haha, with this game, it'll be much easier for us to negotiate. In the past, we either had to go on a business trip or receive guests when we needed to discuss business. It's much better now. We can just meet in the game and discuss it. This deal worth more than 100 million is finalized in the Parallel Worlds Inch barbecue shop. It'll be a great story if it gets out. Five Knights said happily. Bai Jingluan had already written his real name and contact information, and handed it to Wu Yi. Wu Yi took it and looked at Gu Fei, but Gu Fei smiled. It's fine as long as he signs it. He'll be the one doing it. The internet only knew that Qianli's One Drunk Studio was doing efficient leveling, but in fact, not many people knew who developed this leveling method. Five Knights didn't know much either. Hearing what Gu Fei said, he just thought that 100 Years of Jingren was the main character, and didn't say much. He nodded and said, then I'll go offline to draft the contract and send it to you immediately. Okay. 100 Years of Jingren reached out and shook Five Knights' hand. He was also quite happy. Gu Fei watched from the side, but his heart skipped a beat. Butterfly Knot. After Die and Hide, another chapter in the XCOM and XGO series has finally come out. The butterfly is very pleased. Chapter 652. Wu Yi was in a hurry to get the contract done, but Gu Fei didn't mind. After all, he could understand Wu Ye's eagerness to get a big deal done. Getting the contract done swiftly and decisively also showed the importance and sincerity of this deal. Gu Fei felt that something was wrong. During the previous negotiations, both sides kept arguing and sticking to their own views. In the end, no one gave in. But when Gu Fei proposed the division of the agreement, everything went surprisingly smoothly. 30% and 20%, they just casually agreed to it. Gu Fei didn't think that his threat with his sword would be of any use. It was just a game. If he died, he died. In the eyes of these people, how could it be more important than profit? More importantly, when he proposed the division of the agreement, the other 3 people, especially Ao Huang and Weeds, all had a strange look on their faces. Although it was fleeting, how could it escape Gu Fei's sharp eyes? What was so strange about it? In that situation, the other party was biting on the risk of the deal and refused to let go. Then the division of the agreement to share the risk was naturally the best way. Gu Fei could understand why the other party didn't mention this plan. After all, the purpose of everyone's cooperation was to complete the business, not to play with the risk. The division of the deal was still 20 million, and they had to pay for it. So, the other party would rather keep the disgusting price of 2 million and not let go. However, they didn't come up with this idea, but he did. This shouldn't be surprising, right? Could it be that he was such a brainless person in their eyes? Gu Fei was a little hesitant at that time, but Wu Yi answered very quickly, so he didn't think too much about it. Now that everything was settled, Gu Fei thought of Five Knights' deception, the flash of astonishment when he heard about the division, and then the unsloppiness and the eagerness to go offline to draft the contract. When he linked all of these together, Gu Fei realized that there might be something wrong with the division agreement. He, an encyclopedic strategist, were really inexperienced in the game. Could they have been tricked? Moreover, he was the one who proposed the plan, but the one who sold himself was Bai Shijing. Therefore, Gu Fei did not dare to be careless. Seeing that Wu Yi and Bai Shijing had already agreed to contact each other offline, Gu Fei felt that something was wrong. He immediately went up and said, "Let's take a look at the contract again. We'll talk again if there's no problem." Martial artists like them valued their promises very much. Something like a contract was actually just a restriction on the other party. For them, a verbal promise was enough to restrict themselves. Of course, the usual harmless jokes could not be classified as such. Therefore, when Gu Fei jumped out and said this, others might think that it was normal, but it was too important to encyclopedic strategist. If he did not make it clear that he could not sign the contract if there was a problem, even if encyclopedic strategist found out that there was a problem, he might force himself to sign the contract because he had already agreed with someone in the game and be exploited. This was something that a businessman like Five Nights wouldn't be able to understand. Therefore, Wu Yi did not feel anything wrong when he heard this. He smiled and said, "Of course." On the other hand, 100th Era Jingluan understood what Gu Fei was trying to say. For them to say this out loud, it meant that they were going back on their word. Therefore, 100th Era Jingluan looked at Gu Fei in confusion. "Then I'll have to trouble you, Brother Wu Yi. We'll also look for a friend to understand the details of this cooperation." Gu Fei said this while paying close attention to Wu Ye's expression. Wu Yi put on a fake smile and said, "Okay, I'll keep in touch." "Then we'll take our leave first," said Gu Fei. "I'm also going offline to draft a contract. I'll send you two out." Wu Yi also stood up. "You're welcome." The two exchanged polite words and walked out of Eagle's rotisserie together. Wu Yi led Proud Emperor and Weed, Gu Fei and 100 Era's statesmen, and left after saying their goodbyes. As soon as the three left 4th Street, Wu Yi immediately said, "This guy seems to have noticed something." Proud Emperor immediately said, "No way? He was the one who came up with the idea. Why would he suspect it?" "I don't know. I just have this feeling. I won't go offline for now. I'll quickly draft a contract in the game for them to see. It seems like there might be a lot more to this matter." Wu Yi said, "We'd find someone to secretly watch them and see what they're up to." "Okay." Weed nodded. In the environment of the game, the studio's methods of doing business were different from those in real life. Studios like Eagle strongly condemned robberies on the surface, but behind the scenes, they were secretly involved in this gray industry. In a society without a complete legal system and rules, there were even more dirty things than in real life, especially when it came to groups that were tainted with real benefits. Encyclopedic strategist, who had left 4th Street, asked Gu Fei, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong with this?" "I don't know." Gu Fei frowned. "I'm just worried that we don't know anything about this. What if we get cheated?" "Really? I think that Wu Yi is pretty good. His words are quite reasonable. Childish, extremely childish. If he doesn't even have the ability to express himself verbally, how would he have the qualifications to discuss a deal worth hundreds of millions?" The director of the 6 main cities. "It seems like his position in the studio isn't low." Gu Fei said. "Then what do we do now?" "We don't know anything about the game. If we had known earlier, we would have called Brother Yu." Encyclopedic strategist admired Brother Yu very much. It wasn't easy for Brother Yu to have such an expert fan. "It's not too late to ask now," Gu Fei said as he sent a message. Of course, Gu Fei and encyclopedic strategist weren't unkind people. They wanted to discuss the cooperation with the studio, and they had already informed Child Elite Group and Jiannanyu about it. Child Elite Group and the others didn't mind. Now that each of them had earned hundreds of thousands of gold coins, they were quite content. After all, they weren't relying on this to make a living. On the other hand, Jiannanyu and the others were a little unhappy. Gu Fei had called them over, but they were gone after only 2 sessions. This didn't make sense, even though the income from these 2 sessions was much more than what they had earned previously. However, they later learned that they were only going to cooperate with encyclopedic strategist, and that Gu Fei would continue to work with them on Qianli's One Gets Drunk studio. Everyone was delighted. Some people even despised Gu Fei for being despicable. On one hand, he sent encyclopedic strategists to make a lot of money from the studio, and on the other hand, he led his people to compete with the studio for business. He was taking what was in the pot, and taking what was in the pot at the same time. Jiannanyu and the others really didn't want to follow the studio to make a lot of money, because they knew very well that they weren't technical backbones like Gu Fei and encyclopedic strategist. If they followed them to the studio, the remuneration they would receive would definitely not be the same as what they were getting now. Therefore, although they might become competitors with powerful studios in the future, a small workshop had its own way of doing things. Brother Yu was the one who started to worry before things had even begun. Jiannan Yu and the others didn't have that kind of temperament. What's more, these were all veterans of the game. How much longer could this sort of efficient leveling method last? They had always been doubtful. At this time, Gu Fei contacted this group of people again and told them about the negotiation. When they heard about the huge benefits of this cooperation, everyone was shocked. At this moment, Jiannan Yu felt that with such a huge deal in his hands, he would still mind if Yi Shiwen ditched him and took all the profits for himself. This was really a bit too much. Wasn't this ruining Yi Shiwen's future? Moreover, Yi Shiwen didn't ditch him in the end. Gu Fei then talked about the sharing agreement he proposed, as well as the part where he was a bit suspicious. Then he asked, "Experts, I really don't understand this. Please give me some advice." There was silence. "What's going on? Don't you usually talk a lot?" Gu Fei asked. "Brother, we've never worked in a studio before. We don't know much about it, so we don't dare to speak carelessly." "Brother," you said. "Just say what you know," Gu Fei said. "Let me say it," Han Family Young Master said. Everyone was speechless. Han Family Young Master's words were always reserved for himself. When it came to others, he would either not say anything or not say anything good. If he said something, it would mean that Ing Chi Studio was going to be shut down. Sword Demon said, "You don't know much about studios, right? This is a huge deal worth tens of millions, so don't make those deductions." "My deductions are the truth," Han Family Young Master said. Sword Demon ignored him and continued to speak to Gu Fei. "Qianli, there's someone you can ask. He'll know better." "Who?" "Shen Shui," Sword Demon said. "Oh, Brother Yu was the first to understand. If they didn't let Brother Yu say a few words, then Brother Yu wouldn't be able to show his presence. Thus, everyone kept quiet and let Brother Yu say, 'I'm not too sure about Shen Shui, but I think he used to be a professional gamer, and one of those in the studio?'" Sword Demon was obviously familiar with Shen Shui and laughed. He used to work in studios and a lot of them. He would change locations every few days, and he didn't have any professional ethics at all. "Oh, what's going on?" Brother Yu's gossipy spirit was ignited. At that time, most of the people in the studio were still online players. Everyone contacted each other online and didn't know each other in real life. Shen Shui used this to his advantage and created many sock puppets to randomly enter studios. I don't know how he did it, but he managed to get to a high position in many studios. The studios were all in a competitive relationship. This guy controlled so many resources and was a multifaceted spy, so naturally he got more and more popular. Of course, the studios also had a core QQ group, and that guy also applied for multiple accounts to mix in. Then it went bad. One day, there were too many chat windows, and he called the wrong window. Just imagine, the police group was a group of drug dealers, and he shouted, "Tomorrow the cops are coming to sweep up the goods. Brothers, hide the goods well." How could his identity not be exposed? Sword Demon said. Everyone listened and was amazed. For players like them, they looked down on studios that only cared about profit and didn't understand the fun of the game. Professional gamers like Ken and Yu were in between the two. They would use the game as a tool to make money, and the starting point was still their love for the game, so they chose to show their value in the game. This was completely different from studios. Studios were completely focused on the commercial value of the game, so Ken and Yu and the others looked down on studios. It was obviously not a good thing for Shen Shui to play a multifaceted spy, but because he was playing a studio that everyone looked down on, everyone still talked about it with relish and felt quite happy. Today was Gu Fei's first time dealing with people from a formal studio, and he didn't leave a good impression. Only a silly person like 100 Lives Scripture would think that Five Nights was a good person. Now that he heard Sword Demon talk about Shen Shui's past, he felt very happy and immediately replied, "Okay, I'll ask him." "Have you added him as a friend?" "I'll let him know for you," Sword Demon said. "I don't think so." Gu Fei flipped through his friends list. He had talked to Shen Shui, drank with him, and even personally slashed him, but he had forgotten to add him as a friend. "Wait a moment," Sword Demon said to Gu Fei. They were still busy in Silent Night Valley, and messages came and went. Not long after, Sword Demon said to Gu Fei, "Qianli, open the friend switch." "Oh, I forgot." Gu Fei quickly opened the friend switch, and soon received a system message that Shen Shui had added him as a friend. Before Gu Fei could take the initiative to greet him, the message had already arrived. "Cough, I heard from Sword Demon that you have a question to ask me? And it's about the studio," Gu Fei said. "Oh, then you asked the right person. I'm familiar with that, brother," Shen Shui said boldly. So after Gu Fei said it, Shen Shui immediately replied, "Damn, that was too dangerous. You almost fell for it." What? Gu Fei heard that there was indeed a problem. Sharing agreement? Isn't it up to the studio to decide how much the specific income is? As a private party, it's impossible for you to know the financial status of the studio, Shen Shui said. Could it be that they would fake it? Gu Fei was puzzled. It was a formal contract. Since it involved this, of course there had to be a detailed account. If this was the previous studio, you'd be in trouble. The studio isn't a formal company. Where would there be a legal detailed account? It's completely set by them privately. Isn't it how much they say it is? Now it's formal, especially for a studio like Ingqi Studio. They will eventually have a legally recognized detailed income as the basis for implementing the sharing agreement with you. But this detailed account will have a lot of tricks. Do you know what the detailed account is based on? Shen Shui said. Based on what? Taxes, big brother. He must be using his tax bill to prove the profitability of his project. Do you still not understand? Shen Shui said. You're talking about tax evasion? Gu Fei realized what he was talking about. Correct. And let me tell you, it's too easy to evade taxes in the studio industry. Most of their trading channels are gray areas. The relevant departments don't understand and can't supervise them. Where would they go to supervise the circulation of virtual items in the game? Through the game company? The game company can't differentiate between the players and the studio's business. If you really sign a sharing agreement with him, don't even mention 20 million. I can even make the whole thing lose money. You want to share? Sure, I'll give you a negative number and give you the change. Shen Shui's words flowed like a river. Although Gu Fei couldn't digest too much of it in a short time, he at least understood one thing. Negotiating a sharing agreement with a studio would definitely eat you up until not even your bones were left. No wonder when he took the initiative to propose this proposal, those guys had a flash of astonishment. He was walking right into their trap. Fuck, as expected of a profiteer. Gu Fei couldn't help but curse. Of course, all businesses are profiteers. Right, who from Ingqi did you talk to? Shen Shui's curiosity was piqued. He's called Wu Yi. He said he's the director of 6 cities. Do you know him? Gu Fei said. Wu Yi? He's running to Ingqi now? Fuck, don't tell me he's also a traitor? In this aspect, I'm the ancestor. Shen Shui said. Gu Fei wiped his sweat. Being a traitor was such a disgraceful thing. Hearing this guy say it, he didn't feel ashamed, but instead felt proud. Are you still going to do this? If you're going to do it, I'll help you negotiate. I haven't dealt with a studio in a long time. My heart is a little itchy. Hey, Shen Shui said. Gu Fei wiped his sweat again. Didn't you ask Ingqi to make clothes in Shady Forest City? That's a business deal, not a deal, Shen Shui said. Do I have to be a traitor to be a deal? Gu Fei asked. I want to, but I won't have the chance. I'm on the blacklist of all the studios. Make another appointment with Wu Yi. Don't tell him I'm coming. I'll give him a surprise, Shen Shui said. You're really coming? Gu Fei said. Coming right away. I'll buy a ticket and take a plane, Shen Shui said. Plane? Teleportation scroll, big bro. You don't even understand that. You're a bumpkin, Shen Shui said. The problem is, I don't think I said I was going to continue working with them, Gu Fei said. Not working with them? Then I can still play around. It's so boring to fight monsters every day. When I have time, I should learn to fight the studio. Otherwise, my good skills will be wasted. Shen Shui seemed to have an unprecedented passion for torturing the studio. Although Gu Fei was the one who took the initiative to let others bite him, he still deeply despised Five Knights, this kind of unkind guy. Even if you're in business, profit is the most important. But this didn't affect Gu Fei's dislike for this kind of habit. If he could fix it, then fix it. As Gu Fei was thinking this, he suddenly remembered that the one making money was 100 Generations Jingluan. It seemed like he should at least ask for his opinion. So he turned his head and was about to talk to him, but saw 100 Generations Jingluan cautiously say, "There are two guys over there who seem to be staring at us?" "Which two?" Gu Fei turned his head. "Don't look back. The two behind you. Don't get discovered," 100 Generations Jingluan said. "What's there to be afraid of? Go over and ask. If it's not right, then kill them." At this time, Gu Fei also guessed the origins of these two guys, so he walked over very unfriendly. Chapter 653. Oh no. We've been discovered. The two stalkers noticed that Gu Fei had turned around and glanced at them. They immediately strode towards them. Halfway there, they even pulled out their Dark Knight Streamlight swords. The two turned around and wanted to leave, but they were no match for Gu Fei's speed. He teleported in front of them and blocked their way. "Who are you?" The two did not answer. It was as if they did not see Gu Fei. They lowered their heads and wanted to take a detour. Gu Fei had been in the game for a long time. He had been peeped on, ambushed, cursed at, slashed, and dodged. However, he had never been ignored. Gu Fei didn't know if these two brats were pretending to be stupid. He felt that he had to teach them a lesson, so he swung his sword. He did not use any spells. Gu Fei was afraid that it would be too bold, and cut them to death. However, just as the swords were about to reach their bodies, a system notification rang out. The two fellows turned their heads and smiled at Gu Fei. Without stopping, they left in a carefree manner. "What's going on?" 100 Eras Jingren was surprised. He did not think that two normal people would get lost under Gu Fei's sword. He was about to chase after them when Gu Fei smiled bitterly. "Don't chase after them. They're not even level 10. Players who were not level 10 were protected by the PK system. No one could touch players below level 10. What Gu Fei had just received wasn't a notification from the system, but a warning. The system sternly informed him that attacking newbie players below level 10 was a shameful act. If he continued to do so, it wouldn't matter if he didn't kill them or not. His PK points would be calculated. They're not even level 10. 100 Era's strategist was also someone who had experience fighting and killing, so he knew the most basic PK rule. The two players were not even level 10 yet, which meant that they were at the peak of the legendary realm. If he's strong, let him be strong. If he's strong, let him be strong. If he's strong, let him be strong. Gu Fei and 100 Eras Jingren helplessly watched the two leave. At this time, they received a message from Deepwater. "I sent you a teleportation scroll. Send the coordinates back to me." Gu Fei quickly went to the mailbox at the city gate to retrieve the scroll. He recorded the coordinates and sent it back. Deepwater was obviously waiting by the mailbox. 3 seconds later, Gu Fei saw a white light beside him. Deepwater and Lu Ku walked out of the white light. When Lu Ku saw Gu Fei, she was not in a good mood. She snorted twice as a greeting. This girl still remembered the pile of things that Gu Fei had stirred up. Although it was later proven that there was indeed a problem with the water-breaking arrow, the problem was caused by Gu Fei. This person looked like a troublemaker. Deepwater was in high spirits. As soon as he walked out of the white light, he saw Gu Fei and asked, "Where's Wuxia?" "He went to draft a contract," Gu Fei said as he introduced 100 Eras Jingren. 100 Eras Jingren. "You know him, right?" Yes. Deepwater said. "This is Deepwater." Gu Fei introduced him to 100 Eras Jingren. "The 5 roaches." 100 Eras Jingren expressed his goodwill to Deepwater. "The past is unbearable." Deepwater sighed. "Why not?" 100 Eras Jingren had just found out that the 5 roaches had changed to a new version. Gu Fei interrupted from the side. "I did it." Although everyone had let bygones be bygones, this was clearly not a happy topic. Deepwater looked around and asked, "Where's Sword Demon?" And that idiot. When talking about a certain idiot, Deepwater's gnashing of teeth was definitely not fake. They're leveling, Gu Fei said. Why did you guys come to Moonlit Night City? Deepwater asked. It wasn't like Gu Fei and the others were doing something shameful, so he told them everything. Oh, efficient leveling. TSK. Then when will you come to Forest Shade City and give us some pointers? How much? Deepwater asked. 500,000. 100 Era's Jingren was very happy when he heard that there was business again. He knew that the price for the 10 Guild Alliance was 500,000, but he didn't know that this was a favor price, not the market price. Even so, this price also shocked Deepwater. The 10 Guild Alliance had more than 4,000 players, and Deepwater's guild was only level 6, with only 1,050 people. The population base was different, so the per capita burden was naturally different. 500,000 was 500 gold coins per person. For Gu Fei and the others who were already rich, 500 gold coins was nothing, but for normal players, having more than 100 assets was a huge sum, and having more than 1,000 assets was a rich person. Since we're so familiar with each other, give us a discount, Deepwater said. Hee, you can discuss it with Sword Demon and the others later. Gu Fei had already made it clear that he was going to do them a favor. Deepwater didn't stand on ceremony and nodded repeatedly, sure. However, most of the players there are archers, and archers have the least efficient leveling method. Gu Fei said. What do you mean? Deepwater frowned. The efficient leveling method is all close combat, and archers are more restricted. Gu Fei told the truth. We'll talk about this later. The key is to give them a discount, Deepwater said. Gu Fei smiled helplessly. Right, did old Duan still bother you guys? Deepwater asked. Yes, he's been bothering him for the past 2 days, Gu Fei said. And then? Just kill him, Gu Fei said. Deepwater wiped his sweat and changed the topic. Why is Five Nights so slow? Damn, the efficiency of the studio is getting worse and worse. Is there no standard contract? Is it written on the spot? Gu Fei didn't understand this matter, so he naturally couldn't interrupt. However, he noticed that Five Nights said he was going offline to draft a contract, but his name was still lit up. The two sides in the barbecue shop had added each other as friends, so Gu Fei didn't ask much. He just waited. With nothing to do, he called Deepwater and Lu Ke to find a tavern to sit down. This was the first time the two had returned to Moonlit Night City. From the city gate to the tavern, they saw 8 PK murders on the way. Some were seeking revenge, some were asking for a fight, and some were quarreling and killing after bumping into each other. As expected of Moonlit Night City, it really lives up to its reputation. Deepwater sighed. At this time, the two players who weren't even level 10 left Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingren's line of sight, and reported the situation to Weeds. We were discovered so quickly? Weeds frowned. How could you be so careless? I even told you to be careful. This is a big deal. The two felt wronged. I don't know, we were indeed very careful, but we were still discovered. Then did you guys find anything? No, we just had our eyes on them, the two said. What happened after we were discovered? That Qianli got drunk and came over with a sword. We just left like before, the two said. They were indeed violent. Weeds wiped his sweat. It seemed like he wasn't just scaring them when he threatened to kill them in the barbecue shop. Alright, you two can go. Weed sent the two of them away and immediately reported to Five Nights. Five Nights was furiously writing the contract. Deepwater really understood the studio. They indeed had all kinds of standard contracts, and big studios like Inky also had many in the game, so they could directly discuss business in the game. However, the project with Gu Fei was a completely new industry, so Five Nights couldn't find a suitable format, so he found a similar one to modify it. He couldn't directly edit it in the game like on a computer, so he could only make a stack of paper and copy it. We were discovered? We didn't find anything? Five Nights frowned when he heard the report. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will always be victorious. Five Nights didn't have any malicious intentions when he asked the two of them to spy on Gu Fei. He just wanted to know the whereabouts of Gu Fei and 100 Realms strategist. He wanted to know if they would do anything related to the upcoming negotiations, so that he could take the initiative. Now that the two of them were disconnected after just a few minutes, he was naturally a little suspicious. Forget it, I'll act according to the situation. Five Knights thought about it and didn't have any other ideas, so he could only hurry up and get the contract done. After thinking for a while, he sent a message to Gu Fei and 100 Realms Jingren, telling them that he was currently working on the contract in the game, and that he would directly show them in the game. It's still more convenient to communicate face-to-face. Five Knights' reason was very reasonable. Five Knights is working on the contract in the game, he'll bring it to us in a while, Gu Fei said. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Deepwater nodded. The four of them had been sitting in the tavern for about half an hour, and the four of them really couldn't find a common topic to talk about. Often they would fall into an awkward silence after a few words, and in the end, they would just ignore each other. Luca felt bored, so she dragged Deepwater to go shopping with her. Deepwater helplessly agreed, and just as the two were about to leave, Gu Fei suddenly said, "There's news, the contract is done." "Heh, that's fast. Where do we meet?" "Let's go," Deepwater said. "Let's go." Gu Fei led the way, and the place where Five Knights was supposed to meet was still Inky's barbecue. Not long after they left, they came back again. Weeds welcomed them outside the door, and when he saw that Gu Fei and 100 Realms Jingren had brought two more people, he asked in confusion, "These two are?" "Oh, my friends, and they came to take a look," Gu Fei said. Deepwater smiled at Weeds. "Brother, what's your name?" "Weeds," Weeds said. "You're a newbie. Do a good job and you'll have a bright future." Deepwater patted Weeds' shoulder and took the lead to enter. Weeds was confused by his actions, but seeing that people were entering one after another, he hurriedly followed and said, "Same place as before." In the private room, everyone met. Gu Fei originally thought that there would be a storm of blood the moment they met, and he had already prepared his sword. Who would have thought that Five Knights' reaction was exactly the same as Weeds? When he saw Deepwater and Luku, he immediately asked in confusion, "These two are?" Gu Fei was startled, and immediately realized that the two's acquaintance was probably limited to the internet, and there was no such thing as meeting face-to-face, so they didn't know each other. Sure enough, at this time Deepwater also sent him a message. "Which one is Five Knights?" "Talk to this one," Gu Fei hurriedly replied, and then saw Deepwater say with a fake smile, "Hee, I'm his friend and I heard about this, so I came to take a look." "Oh, welcome, welcome." Five Knights didn't forget his etiquette, and quickly gave up his seat to the two. This private room was quite big, and it wouldn't be a problem to seat two more people. After Deepwater sat down, he immediately took the initiative and said casually, "Where's the contract? Take it out and let me see?" There was already a stack of paper on the table, and Five Knights pushed it over, smiling, and said, "I just drafted this and it's a bit rushed. If there are any mistakes, please don't take offense." "Oh right, I haven't asked." Five Knights was asking for Deepwater's name, but Deepwater didn't answer. After taking the contract and glancing at it, he said with contempt, "Profit-sharing contract?" "Yes." Five Knights smiled and nodded. "Umph." Deepwater snorted coldly and casually picked up the contract. His eyes glanced at the contract randomly, thinking that it was the same old trick, so he was thinking about where to start, but after a few glances his expression became more and more surprised, and he couldn't help but glance at Five Knights. The profit-sharing contract was a trick, and this had never been a secret, nor was it unique to the studio. In other industries there were more or less restrictions, but in the studio, which didn't have a complete legal system, it was used extremely arrogantly, to the point that it had become a street rat that everyone wanted to beat up. Many studios already didn't have this form of profit-sharing contract in their minds. And today, Gu Fei actually took the initiative to propose this form. At that time, Five Knights and the others' hearts could be described as turning upside down. He actually took the initiative to propose a profit-sharing contract with the studio. How many novices did he have that didn't understand the gaming industry? It was really hard to imagine that these two people, one was currently the #1 expert in the game, and the other was a top-notch character like the Five Roaches. How could 5 knights miss this kind of wonderful thing that fell from the sky? Naturally, he pushed the boat with the current, and pretended to think for a while before accepting, afraid that the other party would be suspicious. But in the end, Wuyi felt that Gu Fei was still wary of him, so he said that he would ask his friends about it. 5 knights didn't know who this friend was, but as long as one wasn't too inexperienced in the game, they would probably know the dirty inside story of the studio that had already been exposed. At this time, if 5 knights still wanted to treat this as a pie that fell from the sky, he would be a bit too stupid. His draft contract had made some corrections to a few obvious traps. At first glance, at this time, water depth actually didn't find any problems, so he was naturally very surprised. Could it be that the way the studio does things has changed? Water depth was puzzled, but it was really hard for him to accept this idea. He was a character that had dealt with many studios, and indeed understood the dirty methods that these people used to make money. Suddenly turning over a new leaf? They had to at least give a reason. Recently, he hadn't heard of any laws and regulations that targeted the field of online gaming studios. As Water Depth thought about it, he began to carefully study the contract. Gu Fei also realized that the situation wasn't right. At the beginning, Water Depth was arrogant when he came in, with the word trample written all over his face, but after picking up the contract, the situation immediately changed. Water Depth was clearly a bit unprepared, while 5 knights seemed to have a card up his sleeve, as if he was very confident in the contract. What's the situation? Gu Fei sent a message to ask Water Depth. This was the biggest advantage in the game. They could secretly communicate without leaving any traces. The contract is very suspicious. Water Depth replied. Oh, why is it suspicious? Gu Fei asked. It's not suspicious. That's the most suspicious thing about it. Water Depth said, but he had already flipped to the last page of the contract. 5 knights had been smiling as he watched his every move. Seeing that he had reached the last page, he waited for a while, and immediately took the opportunity to ask, how is it? Is there a problem with the contract? In this round, Water Depth had actually patched some of the loopholes that he was familiar with in this contract. Currently, there was only one problem, and that was the transparency of the accounts in the contract. Just as Water Depth was about to raise this question, he didn't expect 5 knights to see that he didn't speak for a long time, and actually spoke first. Currently, there is one problem, and that is the problem of the details of the accounts. According to normal operations, the final income is based on the tax bill, but I see that you all understand, so I won't beat around the bush. Our studio's operation has a little difficulty in paying taxes, so we generally don't use the tax bill as the basis, so we have to carefully discuss what the final basis for the split will be. Water Depth was surprised. He didn't expect that 5 knights had become so cunning after not dealing with him for so long. Obviously, this guy was ready to eat Gu Fei and eccentric strategists like they were rookies from the beginning. But just as Gu Fei suspected that there was a trick, he also found that Gu Fei was on guard. This guy didn't have the slightest bit of wishful thinking, and made such a contract decisively. In this way, his sinister intentions from the beginning were all covered up, and now there was no problem with this contract at all. The only problem that was difficult to solve was the account problem in the split, and this guy even openly brought it to the table for discussion. In this way, this fellow had gained a firm foothold, both emotionally and logically. As for the following issue of splitting the accounts, if this problem was so easy to solve, would it still be a cancerous existence? This guy put this problem on the table to show his fairness, but as a problem that couldn't be solved cleanly, what could he do in the end? At this time, what 5 knights put out was no longer a conspiracy, but an open conspiracy. This matter is in front of you. How do you deal with it? You think of a way. How do I deal with it? Water Depth had a headache. Although 5 knights was cunning, Water Depth could see that he was quite sincere in this cooperation. Cooperating with them was indeed a good opportunity to make money. It was just that in this situation, it had to be said that Gu Fei's initiative to propose splitting the profits was a major mistake. It was very awkward now. He couldn't jump in knowing that he would suffer a loss, right? But now he changed his mind and said that he didn't want to split the profits and wanted to do something else. There was no suitable reason for this at all. In this way, even if the other party accepted it, they would use this as a bargaining chip to lower the asking price. Water Depth was depressed. He didn't expect that 5 Nights had evolved to the point that even he couldn't handle it. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei said at this time, "Can't you figure out the accounts?" If we can't figure this out, I'm afraid there's no way to continue this cooperation, right?" 5 Nights smiled and said, "That's right, so we still have to plan it out." Water Depth sneered. "Plan? This guy wouldn't use his brain on this matter." Unexpectedly, Gu Fei nodded and said, "Then I'll have to trouble brother 5 Nights. We'll wait for your news." 5 Nights was startled. "We don't know much about this matter, so we'll have to trouble brother 5 Nights to think of a suitable plan," Gu Fei said sincerely. Seeing 5 Nights' face that didn't know whether to laugh or cry, Water Depth suddenly couldn't help but laugh out loud. Today he finally understood what it meant to be firm without desires. No matter how sinister 5 Nights was, unfortunately, he sincerely wanted to do this business. Meeting such a person who didn't have much sincerity, he could only be eaten alive. Chapter 654. 5 Nights was very depressed, and Shueishan's laughter made him feel even more unhappy. He could also feel that Shueishan's negotiation partner was not sincere at all. It was the kind of cooperation that depended on whether or not they would cooperate. If the conditions were good, then they would do it. If not, then they would just forget about it. There was no intention of everyone working together. Such a partner would definitely be avoided on normal days, but now that such a big cake like the efficiency leveling method was known to only these 2 people, giving up on this big deal meant giving up on this big deal. Therefore, Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingluan could not care less, but 5 Nights definitely could not. After thinking about it, he finally gritted his teeth and said, "Then how about this? The 2 of you can work with our market research staff to plan and evaluate the prospects of this project. First, we will predict a profit, and then 20% of this profit will be the bottom line for the commission. Even if we can't achieve this in the future, we will still pay the commission according to this amount. This way, the 2 of you can rest assured, right?" 5 Nights emphasized the word both of you, because this project was actually going to cooperate with 100 Era's Jingluan in the end. However, when Qianli was drunk, he kept walking around and causing trouble, so 5 Nights couldn't control himself, and revealed a little bit of his emotions here. He could also see that if it wasn't because of Qianli's drunkenness, 100 Era's Jingluan might have been able to hoodwink him for 2 million. 5 Nights regretted it. In the beginning, he really shouldn't have contacted these 2 people together. He should have first understood the 2 of them, and then only approached 100 Era's Jingluan in private. It was really as good as it could be now, but now he was being stung by Qianli's drunkenness, and he couldn't get rid of him even if he wanted to. It was really annoying. 5 Nights proposed such an idea, but Gu Fei wasn't sure, so he looked at Shueishan. Shueishan smiled and said, "Do you mean the profit, the gross profit, or the net profit? You have to be clear." 5 Nights glanced at the last careless look, and could only say regretfully, "Let's calculate it according to the gross profit?" "What's the difference?" Gu Fei asked from the side. "Gross profit is revenue minus major costs, net profit is revenue minus all expenses, including taxes and the like," Deepwater briefly explained, then looked at 5 Nights and said with a smile, "Gross profit? Since when did the studio have Malliruan?" At this moment, Wu Yi knew that the person Gu Fei brought this time wasn't for nothing, but a person who truly knew the ropes. Gross profit was usually the income minus the cost, and this cost usually referred to the purchase price of the goods. For example, if the goods were sold for 1,000 yuan and purchased for 400 yuan, then the 600 yuan would be the gross profit. As for other costs such as labor, transportation, utilities, rent, etc., these would be deducted when calculating the net profit. On the other hand, the studio was in the business of buying and selling virtual goods and currencies in online games. These virtual goods were automatically generated by the game system, so there was no such thing as a cost. Therefore, there was no gross profit in the studio's business. It could basically be said to be a business without capital. If you met someone who didn't understand and treated the gross profit as a normal situation, you could ask the studio to make up an excuse or reason to produce a cost. This cost would naturally fall into the studio's pocket, and the rest would be used to play with the 20%, which was naturally a lot less. Brother Five Nights, we are all understanding people. Don't make such a mess. The cost of the studio's business is nothing more than labor costs and card count. Electricity can also be included. If you are shameless, you can also include the depreciation of the game equipment. Of course, I know that Ingqi is now a regular big company. You can't wait to include your office space, administrative expenses, and so on. If you really want to calculate it this way, then let's stop playing. Deepwater spoke with fervor and assurance. These were definitely things that Gu Fei couldn't say. Deepwater's trip finally had some meaning. Seeing that the other party was really understanding, Five Nights had no choice but to speak frankly. Of course, these won't be included, but this time, the project will probably end up being very big. The labor costs will be relatively high. Maybe our studio doesn't have enough staff, so we will temporarily transfer a group of people. So, on the labor side, shouldn't we appropriately include a little bit? Of course, we can already know how much this cost is when we evaluate and plan this project together. The profit that will be used in the end will be the revenue minus the cost that we negotiated. How about that? Hearing this, Deepwater knew that Five Nights finally gave in and stopped playing tricks. This idea was basically fair to both parties. He immediately sent a message to Gu Fei. It's about time. Unexpectedly, Gu Fei frowned again. Do a prospect evaluation? You want to calculate the cost? How would we understand this? Five Nights almost blurted out. You don't understand? Of course he held back. And this wasn't a trap. Everyone was working together. Considering that this part was linked to the final profit, the studio would definitely raise the cost to the highest and estimate the revenue conservatively. On the other hand, Gu Fei's side was going in the opposite direction. This was a competition to see who was more familiar with the business. Although Five Nights really hoped that these two who didn't understand would personally do it, he thought that the other party wouldn't be so stupid. This matter might have to rely on the guy that he brought who was very familiar with the studio to participate. Who is this person? I asked him just now, but he didn't say his name. Could it be that it's inconvenient? Five Nights couldn't think of it. If it was someone from a big studio that was on the same level as Ingqi, once they received this news, they would definitely go crazy and try to win these two over. Why was Five Nights so anxious? Why did he act so quickly? Wasn't it because he was afraid that other studios would get ahead of him? Once the efficiency leveling method appeared out of nowhere, many studios would be eyeing it. Now that Five Nights had reached this step, he was actually surprised, afraid, and happy. He was afraid that someone would come out of nowhere. This guy in front of him actually ran to the table to negotiate with him, so he shouldn't be someone from a rival studio. Since he wasn't one of them, why wouldn't it be convenient to mention his name? Gu Fei, an encyclopedic strategist, didn't understand things like market research and evaluation. Five Nights was very happy that they were like this. Of course, he wouldn't give them any more ideas. The two of them looked at Deepwater. Deepwater sighed. I also want to continue helping you, but I'm afraid I won't be able to help you in the next matter. Why? Gu Fei asked. Because I'm Deepwater. Deepwater laughed. Deepwater. Five Nights suddenly stood up. The table didn't flip over, but the glass of wine in front of him spilled out and splashed onto the plate of barbecued meat on the table. Five Nights clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and glared as if he was ready to eat Deepwater alive. It was rare for Deepwater to be smiling at this time. He said to Lu Ke beside him, seeing him like this trip really wasn't in vain. Lu Ke glared at him and didn't say anything. Obviously, she was also someone who knew about the conflict between Deepwater and Five Nights. Seeing this, Gu Fei hurriedly knocked on the table and comforted Five Nights. Don't be angry, don't be angry. If we fight now, it'll be very disadvantageous for you. Ha ha ha, yes, very disadvantageous. Deepwater said as he squeezed towards Gu Fei, feeling a special sense of security. Of course, proud emperor, and we knew Deepwater's name. But because of his previous title as one of the 5 roaches, the two of them didn't know what grudges there were between Deepwater and 5 Knights. However, seeing that Deepwater seemed to have a good understanding of the studio, the two of them guessed that this person might have worked in Ingqi or some other studio in the past and had a grudge with 5 Knights. The two of them watched 5 Knights nervously, for fear that he would ruin the deal in a moment of impulse. Although the big fish had been snatched by this boss, there was still some bones and soup left after the meat was gone. If this really went wrong, then there wouldn't even be a fish bone left. Moreover, it was because of 5 Knights' personal grudges, then the two of them would be wronged. Proud Emperor and Weed looked at each other, hoping that the other would stand up and dissuade 5 Knights, but at the same time, they were afraid that this dissuasion would be inappropriate and would anger their boss, so the two of them didn't dare to move. But then Proud Emperor's eyes became a little more severe, and Weed instantly burst into tears. Well, if I don't go now, I will anger my boss. Do I still need to worry about the future? Helpless, this guy braced himself and wanted to go over and persuade 5 Knights. Who would have thought that this 5 Knights could become the director of the studio? He really wasn't an ordinary person. At least he knew the general situation. Just now, he lost his composure in anger, but at this time, he had already calmed down. He picked up the wine glass on the table and no longer looked at Deepwater. He just said to Gufei and Encyclopedic Wisdom, "Then about the cooperation, let's do it like this, right? I will set up a special team to conduct market research and evaluation on this project with the two of you. I will draft the contract immediately, and then send it to the Encyclopedic brothers. How about it?" TSK, look at him. He is indeed a person who does big business. He can hold back and release freely. He is not the same as before. Deepwater said again. Luca pinched him fiercely. Stop talking. In front of them, such a big business was about to be negotiated. If 5 Knights was really angered by Deepwater's provocation and caused the deal to fall through, Luca felt that she would be too sorry for Gufei and Encyclopedic Wisdom. At this moment, she was also a little annoyed that Deepwater didn't know the severity of his actions. In fact, Deepwater wasn't someone who didn't know the severity of his actions. He also learned that Gufei didn't want to cooperate with this studio when he sent the message, so he boldly came to make trouble. Who would have thought that the following plans that 5 Knights made were all well-behaved? After a few talks, the deal came back to life again. Deepwater didn't want to come in vain, so he reported his name. No matter what, he wanted to see 5 Knights go crazy after knowing that it was him. His appearance was quite satisfactory, but 5 Knights quickly restrained his emotions and didn't act impulsively. Instead, he continued to talk with Gufei and Encyclopedic Wisdom in an orderly manner, so Deepwater added another sentence. 5 Knights coldly snorted, glanced at Deepwater and said, "We have plenty of opportunities to settle accounts." Deepwater nervously said to the left and right, "I'm so scared, so scared." 5 Knights didn't say much and said to Gufei and Encyclopedic Wisdom, "Then we'll go do our work first, we'll contact each other later." After saying that, 5 Knights hurriedly left with Proud Emperor and Weeds. As soon as they left the barbecue shop, Proud Emperor came up to them. "Should we call the fire team to clean up Deepwater?" The fire team was a special team in Eagle Studio that was responsible for combat missions in the game. The level, equipment, and skills of this team were all quite good. This kind of team existed in every major studio. If the boss was a gaming fanatic, then the combat team of the studio would become the boss's personal soldiers. The boss would direct them to the east and not the west. Normally, they wouldn't make a lot of money, but they were the boss's favorite group of people. Encountering this kind of boss was quite unlucky. Fortunately, the boss of Eagle Studio was a serious businessman. Making money was his first priority, so he valued those with business vision, organization, and communication skills. That was why Eagle Studio's fire team wasn't very strong. However, if they were to deal with players, then even people like Roach 5 wouldn't be afraid. Sometimes when the people in the studio were angry when discussing business with players, some people with bad character would ask their colleagues in the fire team to help them vent their anger in the game. As for the leaders, there were countless cases of them abusing their power for personal gain. But when Five Knights heard this idea, he glared at Proud Emperor. Do you know why I was in such a hurry to leave? Didn't you see that Qianli and Encyclopedic Wisdom? Those two didn't have much interest in this cooperation, so their sincerity was limited. Just now in the room, that Qianli was clearly siding with water depth. If we were to be pushed down by that water depth, then those two would act rashly and ruin our business. So right now we definitely can't touch that water depth. Do you understand? Then we're not here anymore? What if he tries to persuade Qianli and Encyclopedic Wisdom to not cooperate with us? Proud Emperor said. That might not be the case. His purpose for coming here is pretty clear. It's mainly to help those two. I don't think he would go so far as to ruin his friend's business just because of his personal grudge with me. So as long as we don't provoke Qianli and Encyclopedic Wisdom, then it'll be fine. We'd heard this and said, actually, if we want to deal with water depth, our studio won't touch him. I can pick a few normal players from our guild to deal with him. He wouldn't even know who they are. Let's not. Five Knights said. For a gentleman to take revenge, 10 years is not too late. Right now, the most important thing is to do this project well. It's better not to cause any more trouble. These few days, send a message to everyone in the city. If they see drunken Qianli and Encyclopedic Wisdom, then they should pay more attention to them. At the same time, pay attention to the movements of the other studios. I'm going to get the contract right now. If we don't sign it, then I won't be able to control myself. Alright everyone, go do your work. Oh, Proud Emperor and Weed wanted to help their leader vent his anger, but in the end, they were given the cold shoulder. They cursed in their hearts and then went their separate ways. Five Knights was really concerned about this business. He hurriedly went offline and started working. In the barbecue shop, Water Depth boasted again. How is it? Brother, you didn't come here for nothing, right? I helped you secure this business. It's a business worth tens of millions. That's unbelievable. You can actually earn so much money in the game. Gu Fei and Encyclopedic Wisdom exclaimed. You guys are just too narrow-minded. Water Depth shook his head repeatedly. Let's talk about the players in the past. They always saw the professional players around them being busy and doing the same thing over and over again. They calculated and felt that it didn't seem like much money. Why didn't they think about how much they could only see? A player can only see one server at most. The studio's business involves all the servers operating together. The amount that they could see would be multiplied by hundreds or even thousands. Gu Fei nodded and then said, Then is this contract okay? Water Depth said reluctantly. Although I hate him, I have to say that this guy didn't play any tricks in the end. The contract is still fair. After that, for the evaluation of the market, you too can find someone who knows the industry. It's a process of negotiation. But this person must be someone you are familiar with and trustworthy. Sometimes in the studio industry, people in the same industry protect each other. You can find someone from other studios. Don't think that they are usually competitors. At this time they can join hands to play you. You can save a lot of commission. Just take 10% of the commission. Where can I find such a person? I think you should go. Although that Five Knights isn't very kind, I think he is still rational. He is sincere about this business. If you do it, even if he hates you in his heart, he will endure it. Gu Fei said. Water Depth nodded and said, He is fine, but I'm afraid that I won't do well if I work with emotions. You have to follow my temperament when dealing with studios. I'll contact the next studio long ago and then watch them bid and raise the price. Hee, do you too have this intention? You guys are now rare commodities. Forget it. The two wiped their sweat together. Hey, what's wrong with that? Doing business is actually like this. Mutual deception. The people in the studio are originally not good people. It would be a waste not to take advantage of them. Water Depth said. Why do you hate the studio so much? Gu Fei felt strange. There was no hatred in this world for no reason. This is a long story. Water Depth said. Long story? Didn't you always suspect that the collapse of your guild with Sword Demon was caused by the studio behind the scenes? Luca said. Oh, there's such a thing? Tell me about it. Gu Fei said. You want to hear about the collapse of the guild? That's a long story, and I can't remember it clearly now. Being caused by the studio was just this guy's guess. Sword Demon and the Han family young master all had different opinions. Anyway, this guy has always been messing with other people's studios since then. Just now, that 5 nights, don't think that just because you don't like him, he did something bad to get along with Water Depth. That would really be wronging him. Luca said. Of course not. Gu-Fei smiled and said, just looking at their reactions just now, I know who bullied who. Just now, 5 Nights was so angry that he wanted to eat someone, but Water Depth was still proud. Even a blind person could see that Water Depth must have tormented 5 Nights in the past, causing the other party to hate him to the bone. This guy isn't a good person anyway. Water Depth said. Which of the people in the studio isn't like this? Luca scolded Water Depth. That's why I hate studios the most. Water Depth said. Get lost. Luca was not in a good mood. Is this also a long story? If you remember clearly, tell me about it. Gu-Fei said. Butterfly knot. I originally had nothing to say today, but I was afraid that if I didn't say a few words, everyone would think this chapter wasn't over. I had no choice but to end it like this. Chapter 655. This matter isn't that complicated. To sum it up, he sold them out and made them take the blame. Isn't that right, Water Depth? Luca said. I don't like the way you phrased it. Water Depth said seriously. Strictly speaking, the project he was managing was my bargaining chip. I was right about the project, not the person. It just so happened that he was the supervisor of the project, and it just so happened that he became the target of everyone's suspicion. So the blame was put on his head. In all honesty, this wasn't my plan. I'm not that person. What is it? You two don't talk in riddles. Tell me clearly, Gu-Fei said. How do I tell you this? Water Depth draped his arm over Gu-Fei's shoulder and said, Once upon a time, I was a middleman in the online gaming world. Tisk. Luca snorted. Just kill her. Water Depth begged Gu-Fei. Really? Gu-Fei touched his sword. Don't. Water Depth was scared. This guy didn't have a sense of humor at all. I'm just trying to scare you. Gu-Fei laughed. How about we let Luca say it? Let him say it himself. I don't have that kind of time. Luca said. Then don't interrupt. Water Depth cleared his throat solemnly. Where were we? Yes, once upon a time, I was a middleman in the online gaming world. This is a very technical job. It requires a sharp eye for the market, courage to move forward, and more importantly, accurate information from multiple sources. In order to do this job well, I applied for a number of sock puppets and mingled in the popular service areas of the major gaming studios. Speaking of which, one day, on a server in the online game Legend of Chivalry, I found 5 Nights with a group of little brothers from the studio sweeping up goods. By the way, do you know about this game? I don't. Gu-Fei shook his head. Tsk. I don't know. You wouldn't understand even if I explained it to you. Do you understand sweeping up goods? I don't understand. Gu-Fei said. Why are you asking if you don't know anything? Water Depth was not satisfied. Gu-Fei touched his sword. Water Depth nodded. If you don't understand, then learn. That's how young people are. This is a common occurrence before major updates in the game, but at that time, there was no system announcement about the updates in Legend of Chivalry. For this to happen, the studio must have received some insider information. As a second-hand trafficker, what I sell are the intelligence gathered by spies on all sides. After seeing what 5 Nights was looking for, he immediately logged into the sock puppets of the other studios and spread the news. Hence, in Legend of Chivalry, all the studios that were established in the game came out to sweep up the goods. This was originally the exclusive insider news of 5 Nights Studio. Suddenly, it was known to the whole city. Of course, everyone knew that there was a traitor. What a pity. At that time, their studio seemed to suspect that 5 Nights was a mole. In fact, I didn't know why they suspected him. It couldn't be because he was in charge of sweeping the goods, right? Anyway, I heard that he was fired by the studio. Tut-tut, said Deepwater. After listening to this, Gu Fei was very puzzled. What benefits did you get from this? Water Depth glanced at him and said, That's why I said you're still a little inexperienced. In that era, this kind of information was extremely valuable. No matter who the person who provided this kind of information was, as long as the information was accurate, there would be a bonus. Otherwise, where did you think Five Knights and the others got their insider information from? That was also because someone in the game had dirty hands and feet, and received a huge bonus. Now, I've revealed this information to 5 studios at once and received a bonus from 5 studios. In the end, I even got a profit bonus. Isn't this benefit enough? Of course. Water Depth paused and said, My main purpose wasn't this bonus. At that time, I was just unhappy that the studios were messing around in the game all day long. Anyway, I wanted to make some trouble for them. Originally, it was one studio that was quietly sweeping up the goods. Now that so many studios have begun to snatch up the goods, it's unknown how much those 2 things can sell for. Now that I've acquired them, the studios are competing with each other to raise the price. No matter what, it's also reducing their profits. Gu Fei nodded. Water Depth's matter was simple. It was just a few sock puppets passing information and stirring up trouble. But he was able to do this because the seeds he had planted had already blossomed and borne fruit. How to get so many sock puppets to infiltrate the various studios and gain their trust one by one was the hardest part of the sewing process. No one knew it was me at the time. Later on, one of my sock puppets was accidentally exposed. That second-hand dealer building of mine collapsed in an instant. I've really suffered for a long time. Water Depth sighed. If one of your sock puppets was exposed, why would the other sock puppets be exposed as well? Gu Fei didn't understand. Sai, you don't know. This is because sometimes I use 2 or more sock puppets to put on a 2-man show for others to see. When people don't know anything, they won't be able to see through the flaws. When they realize that one of them is a mole, they can track down the mole's past and find out all of them. Water Depth said, How do you put on a 2-man show? Gu Fei asked. It's simple. For example, today we're negotiating with 2 studios. I'm 5 Knights. I found a project, so I suggested to the boss that I wanted to find a studio to cooperate with. The boss said it's fine and you can go and contact them. So I opened Water Depth again and told the boss here that the studio has some kind of project and wants to cooperate with us. The boss also said it's fine and you can go and take a look. So 5 Knights went home and reported that he had contacted Water Depth. Water Depth went home and reported that he had contacted 5 Knights. Alright, let's talk. It's me on the left and right. What the hell is there to talk about? Let's put on a 2-man show. Water Depth said. You're too talented. Gu Fei exclaimed. However, Water Depth was very ashamed. I can't do it. I still haven't mastered it. Later on, I was exposed because of this matter. Once, 5 studios had a meeting and opened a chat group. I opened 5 QQ accounts to deal with them. I got dizzy for a moment and one of the accounts said the wrong thing. Those bastards' eyes were really sharp. I was discovered with just one sentence that I said, and I was caught by the roots in an instant. It turned out that after so many things, there were still some flaws. Now that there was a breakthrough, didn't I get wiped out? Fortunately, I had some foresight and found a half-baked hacker friend to disguise all the IP addresses. It was enough to fool those people. At that time, those guys said that they wanted to hire assassins to kill me. Damn, I don't know if they hired them or not. You say to deal with me, how much money would they need to hire an assassin? As Water Depth said this, he began to look forward to it. Gu Fei wiped his sweat and said, Then you've appeared in public again. Aren't you afraid of revenge? Water Depth laughed and said, Things have changed since the past. Back then, out of the few studios I worked with, 3 of them have already collapsed. 2 of them changed bosses, and 1 of them went to earn foreign exchange. Only Sincerity has developed to a certain scale now. However, they're now regular big companies, so they can still fuss about these old matters. Heh. Now it seems that this big grudge is gone. Only Comrade 5 Knights' small resentment is left. 5 Knights was indeed worthy of resentment. From the beginning to the end, Five Nights did not provoke anyone. He was completely the scapegoat for what Water Depth had done. At that time, Five Nights, who was fired from the studio, must have been full of grievances. For this kind of thing, even if Water Depth was deeply exposed in the future, everyone's energy would be focused on strongly condemning Water Depth. Who would think of vindicating the victim in this kind of incident? This guy, Water Depth, was obviously very prejudiced against the studio and everyone in the studio, so he didn't feel guilty at all for indirectly harming Five Nights. He even excitedly enjoyed the reaction of the person involved when he saw him in the future. It was really cruel. And now that Gu Fei understood the whole story, he was also cruel enough. He actually didn't sympathize with Five Nights. It was really in the process of dealing with Five Nights today. This guy's selfish calculations made Gu Fei look down on him. Five Nights felt that Gu Fei and the others were not sincere about the cooperation, but unexpectedly, Gu Fei also felt that his behavior was even more insincere. Gu Fei thought that if there was sincerity in the negotiation, he would give a psychological price, and the other party would give a psychological price. Everyone would negotiate, each side would make concessions, and everyone would be happy. As for cooperation, the original intention was for everyone to get rich together. This was sincerity. Five Nights, everything was based on his own interests, and he thought of ways to force the partners to give up their interests. Gu Fei didn't feel that this was sincerity at all, especially when Five Nights said that the 100 Lives Classic calculated decades of living expenses, and said that it had nothing to do with the current negotiation. Gu Fei felt that it was a joke. This kind of guy didn't even think about why he wanted to make money. He only wanted to make money for the sake of making money. His vision was simply not good enough. Five Nights felt that Gu Fei and the others didn't understand business, and didn't have any sincerity. In fact, it was because Gu Fei's vision was higher. Five Nights' business methods, in his eyes, were simply petty. He didn't have the demeanor of a big boss. He could run a small business, but he wasn't cut out for a big business. This kind of person that Gu Fei didn't like, no matter how much sympathy he had, it wouldn't be able to reach him. Right now, he only wanted this business deal to be done quickly, and help the 100 Lives Classic get out of this predicament. How is it? Brother, your past is considered glorious, right? Deepwater said at this time. Glorious. Gu Fei nodded. It's a pity that in this kind of game environment, there won't be such an opportunity anymore. Deepwater shook his head and sighed. Gu Fei was speechless. He really didn't like Five Nights, but it wasn't to the extent that he hated the studio and its members like Deepwater. This guy's realm was just too high. Then, what about the guild going bankrupt? What exactly happened? Tell me as much as you can. Gu Fei said. That matter is really too complicated. Deepwater said. And we don't want to talk about it anymore. You better not ask Sword Demon. I don't think he'll be willing to talk about it. Luca said to Gu Fei. Is that so? Gu Fei could only agree. The four then chatted for a bit more before leaving Inga's barbecue shop. Because it was a shop opened by the studio, Deepwater had already gritted his teeth, and was prepared to fiercely bargain down the price. In the end, Five Nights had already instructed them to waive the bill. Thus, Deepwater adjusted his strategy and decided to come over and eat 3 meals a day, then asked the other party to waive the bill. If you have the time, why don't you help us with market research? When the time comes, you'll get a share of the bonus. Gu Fei said. Deepwater smiled and said, I was just joking before. I didn't help because this job is very time-consuming, and I really don't have the time recently. The battle for the main city is getting closer and closer. All the main city guilds are actively preparing. As the guild leader, I have to keep an eye on them all day. I say, hurry up and teach us the efficient leveling method. Why don't you come with me on the plane now? I have a ticket with me. I'm still teaching the people from the 10 Guild Alliance. The method they're learning is very complicated, so I still need to give them some guidance. Gu Fei was in a difficult position. Deepwater had just helped them a lot, so this request was really hard to refuse. But the matter with Cloud Twilight wasn't over yet. The leveling method was quite complicated, so Gu Fei still needed a lot of guidance from the side. While Five Nights had been tossing and turning, Cloud, Twilight, and the others were actually still bitterly waiting. Then I'll leave you a ticket. After you're done teaching them, directly fly over to my side, Deepwater said. All right. Gufei nodded. Then we'll go back first. Say hello to Sword Demon for me. If they have time, they can come over too, Deepwater said. Okay, I'll ask them, Gufei said. For the current them, teleportation scrolls really weren't much. As long as they had the goods, money wasn't a problem. Deepwater and Lu Ke teleported back to Shady Forest City. Gufei and 100 Era's Jingren also headed towards Silent Night Valley. Apart from leveling with the 10 Guild Alliance, Gufei also had to ask these well-connected experts if there were any trustworthy friends who could come over to help with this market research. In Silent Night Valley, Cloud, Twilight, and the others continued to sweat like rain. They were already very skilled at leveling alone, and their improvement in leveling together wasn't small either. At the very least, they wouldn't be used as sandbags by monsters anymore. Seeing that Gufei and 100 Era's Jingren had returned, a group of people surrounded them. They didn't even ask about the leveling method, and all asked about how the business was going. That was tens of millions of yuan. Who wouldn't care? It's going well, Gufei said. Awesome. Too awesome. Everyone praised. Jiannan Yu and the others were even more envious. Look at them. It was easy to earn money in the game. Just doing a part-time job could earn tens of millions of dollars. He worked himself to death and barely made ends meet. If they can earn tens of millions in one go, then they can play games in peace for the rest of their lives. Jiannan Yu and the others' pursuit was the same as 100 Era's Jingren's. They wanted to earn enough money to play games in peace, and 100 Era's Jingren wanted to earn enough money to play martial arts in peace. Right now they need us to investigate and evaluate the costs and profits of this deal with them. Both Baisher and I don't know much about it. Big Nan, are you guys good at this? Gufei directly asked Jiannan Yu. He wanted to fight for this kind of money-making opportunity for these guys. I'm afraid we're not as professional as their studio. Jiannan Yu and the others hadn't done such professional and meticulous work before, so they didn't dare to casually agree. What professionalism? The two of us don't know anything, and are afraid of being tricked by them. That guy called 5 Knights thought of a way to let you slip in. He's too sinister, Gufei said. At the mention of sinister, everyone couldn't help but look at the Han family young master. This kind of guy should be handled by him. In the end, everyone was greeted with a middle finger from the Han family young master. Everyone hurriedly turned their heads as if nothing had happened. If that's the case, then leave it to us. We won't be tricked so easily. Jiannan Yu expressed his stance. He believed that he wasn't easy to deal with. Let's discuss how to split the money after we earn it back, Gufei said. We don't know the exact amount yet. You're so cunning. Wouldn't Comrade Big Nen risk his life to keep a close eye on the money for you? The Han family young master suddenly interrupted. Jiannan Yu only smiled faintly. They had already seen Gufei's character very clearly. They didn't need to worry about money if they followed him. This person didn't care about money at all. If there were benefits, he would think of everyone. Having a boss like this was truly a blessing. So, whether or not Gufei was scheming like the Han family young master had pointed out, Jiannan Yu and the others didn't mind at all. They only nodded their heads in agreement. Alright, then let's wait for news from 5 Knights. Oldyan, how's your leveling going? If you have any questions, hurry up and ask. I'm in a hurry to go to the next guild, Gufei said. Next guild? Where? Yin Zhongmu was vigilant. Every guild in Moonlit Night City was their competitor. Of course, Yin Zhongmu hoped that Gufei wouldn't accept any more business from Moonlit Night City. However, he also knew that this was only his own wishful thinking. Now that he heard that Gufei had found another guild after going out for a while, Yin Zhongmu could only ask around first. In the future, he would have to pay attention to this guild. Water Depth asked me to go over and give her some guidance. Gufei saw that everyone was looking at him and hurriedly said. When Yin Zhongmu heard that it was from Shady Forest City, his mood changed. He hurriedly went up to Gufei with his companions as if nothing had happened. The people from Child Elite Group didn't want to go up to him, so they all asked in the chat, How much is water depth? You beast. Don't you know water depth? How dare you ask for money? Gu Fei said with disdain. Everyone hurriedly retorted. We're just afraid that you're a beast. Even water depth is asking for money. Brother Yu, on the other hand, mumbled. Why do I feel that ever since we reached an agreement with the rebirth amethyst crystals, we don't need them anymore? Reborn amethyst? What agreement? Gu Fei wasn't there at the time, so he didn't know about it. When Brother Yu told Gu Fei everything, he didn't think much of it. He continued to urge Yun Zhongmu and the others to level, leaving Brother Yu to worry alone. The idea with reborn amethyst was all his. If he didn't keep his end of the deal, would those girls cause trouble for him? Brother Yu shuddered at the thought of Non-Smiler being taught a lesson by them in the tavern, until he had to pretend to be dead. What? Emperor and wheat? On the other side, Gu Fei was supervising the leveling duo while chatting with Yun Zhongmu. Yun Zhongmu wanted to get some information about the workshop in Moonlit Forest City. The workshop's influence was huge, so he had to pay attention to it, especially when a major event like the main city battle was about to begin. During the conversation, Proud Emperor and Weed were brought up. Yun Zhongmu didn't think that the two biggest rivals of his guild were members of Inch Workshop, and they were the bosses of Moonlit Forest City. This wasn't good news for them. Chapter 656. Cloud Twilight felt that his life was full of ups and downs. As soon as he entered the game, he was stuck in Moonlit City, a main city. He watched as Silvermoon's Bygone Dust Guild developed and became a tyrant. Although they got rid of the Bygone Dust Guild, in a place like Moonlit City, when one Bygone Dust Guild fell, a new Bygone Dust Guild rose up. Cloud Twilight and his 10-guild alliance were seen as the new Bygone Dust Guild. Cloud Twilight was now like Silvermoon in the past. There were a bunch of people in the city plotting how to deal with him every day. According to the statistics of a fellow in the guild who loved to play with statistics, ever since the 10-guild alliance became the public enemy of the entire city, Cloud Twilight was ambushed an average of 17 times a day. Now Arrogant Emperor and Weed were just like Cloud Twilight in the past. They brought a group of people who were far smaller than Cloud Twilight's 10-guild alliance, and fought with them every day. Cloud Twilight saw that these two fellows resembled his demeanor from back in the day, which was why he hadn't hardened his heart to start a war with these two guilds. However, now that he heard that these two fellows were actually members of the workshop, he couldn't help but be more careful. Especially when the other party was a big gaming studio like Inga. This kind of background was incomparable to any RMB player. No matter how much RMB players were willing to spend, this was just an entertainment project after all. How could they put their entire fortune into it? A gaming studio was different. This was basically their entire fortune. Regardless of whether it was to protect or fight for benefits, these guys would put their lives on the line. Although Inga's gaming studio was a big gaming studio, they didn't have more official employees than a guild. Moreover, the strictness of both parties was on a completely different level. A guild was at most an entertainment salon. If people weren't happy, they could just leave. A gaming studio was a job. Especially since Inga was so formal, they had all sorts of insurance money. How could they just leave like that? Coincidentally, there was also a penalty for breach of contract. And these were official employees. In the gaming studio system, a considerable number of members were part-time players. They weren't strictly under the establishment of the gaming studio, but they were still considered half members of the gaming studio. If these people were included, then the gaming studio would be very large. In a parallel world like this, it was impossible to estimate how many people there were in Fancy Workshop. Therefore, when he thought about his opponent's background, Yun Zhongmu couldn't help but feel a little guilty. As soon as he thought of this, Yun Zhongmu couldn't even concentrate on his leveling. He couldn't help but move closer to Gu Fei and ask, 1,000 Miles, have you been busy lately? What do you mean? Gu Fei was watching the two leveling up. After chatting with him for a bit, Cloud Morning went to fight monsters. In the end, it hadn't even been 2 minutes. How did this monster come back to him? Isn't the main city battle coming up? When the time comes, if you have time, how about you come over and help me out? Just like last time, we can fight shoulder to shoulder. Cloud Twilight said. He didn't mention anything about money. He had already done business with Gu Fei, and he could tell that Gu Fei wasn't a person who cared about money. If he really wanted to buy a mercenary group, it would be meaningless, so he chose to play the emotional card. There's been a lot going on lately. I'm going to Shady Forest City in a bit, and there's also the matter with Fancy Workshop. Even though it's mainly handled by 100 Lives Scripture, I still have to go and take a look. I've been busy, Gu Fei said. Then there's something else. You have to take care of your brother. Cloud Twilight said. What is it? Gu Fei asked. You just said that Proud Emperor and Wheats are from Fancy Workshop. I've been dealing with them for a while, but I actually just found out. The guilds they lead have always been our 10 Guild Alliance's competitors in Moonlit Night City. This time's main city battle will probably be the same. I didn't think that these two guys would be from a workshop. Brother, you've been working with them recently. If the main city battle starts, they won't ask for your help, right? Cloud Twilight said worriedly. Gu Fei was startled. I didn't hear them say anything about this. I've been hearing a lot about the main city battle. What are they fighting for? They haven't announced how they're going to fight, right? That's why I've always been unsure. Cloud Twilight said. Old Cloud, I feel like you've changed. Gu Fei suddenly said. What? Cloud Twilight was startled. Even though we're not very familiar with each other, and have only interacted a few times, the impression you give me is that this isn't something you'd do. I remember when we were doing a mission and passing by Moonlit Night City, we were being chased by you guys. At that time, I helped her, and you even said that you wanted to PK me. Why does it seem like you've become less courageous after I've finished this mission? What you're saying is that even if I can't help you guys, I shouldn't help Proud Emperor and Wheats, right? Look, this isn't your style, Gu Fei said. Cloud Twilight listened to Gu Fei's words and was fiercely startled. He didn't think that even Qianli would be able to see through it. Ever since he led the 10 Guild Alliance and began to feel proud of himself, he gradually discovered that he was simply a housekeeper for over 4,000 people. In the past, he was just a group of close brothers. If there were any problems, everyone would discuss it together and solve it with laughter and anger. But now, we'll just make a guild with 50 people, and it'll be over. Gu Fei said it easily. Cloud Twilight could only sigh. If the scale was so big, it would be troublesome. If the scale wasn't as big, it wouldn't be enough. What to do? He could only continue to suffer and be happy. Meanwhile, Gu Fei and encyclopedic strategists gave guidance to the two players who were leveling up. They explained the difficulties, key points, and doubtful points clearly. Cloud Twilight had just understood Gu Fei's situation, so he didn't care about his own guild anymore. He started thinking for Gu Fei's sake. He scolded the two players who were leveling together. Ask. All you know how to do is ask. You're all grown up already. If you can't figure out how to fight a monster with just 2 people for a few hours, use your brains. Brother Qianli has something to do later. Don't waste his time. The group of apprentices who were leveling together were also very depressed. They said to Gu Fei with a sullen face, Brother Qianli, we've barely grasped this method, but it'll take a while for us to get used to it. You want us to be masters and then teach others? We can't do that. Then call more people over. I'll teach a few more groups. When the time comes, you guys can compare and study with each other. You might be able to grasp it faster. Then 1 to 10, 10 to 100. You want us to teach all of you? Do you want us to die from exhaustion? Gu Fei said. I'll call people over right now. Cloud Twilight didn't hesitate. He immediately made an emergency summon. The players who didn't have agility and had to rely on leveling together came over in an instant. Gu Fei sent a message to Water Depth, telling him that he still had work to do on his side. What's the rush? It's still early. Water Depth was very calm. Gu Fei looked at the time. Yes, it was only 10 o'clock. For these players, the day had just begun. It was still very early. The new apprentices who were learning the leveling method complained incessantly. The first batch of apprentices could finally hold their heads high. They laughed at the new batch of apprentices and pointed at them from the side. They were even more of a master than Gu Fei. It wasn't easy to teach another batch of graduates. Gu Fei was ready to leave. Sword Demon and the others didn't want to just stay in Silent Night Valley. They all prepared to open a path with Gu Fei. Cloud Twilight sent them off. He pulled Sword Demon and the others to talk about the city war, and invited them to join. It wasn't until Yutian Shenming and Han Family Young Master said that they had guilds that Gu Fei slapped his forehead, and remembered that he had a guild too. Although Reborn Amethyst was young, with slender waist dance's unwillingness to be left out, how could she not participate in a big cake like the city war? After leaving Silent Night Valley, Gu Fei took a teleportation scroll, and prepared to fly to Forest Shade City. In the end, Child Elite Group and Jian Nan's group of 7 surrounded him. Sword Demon and the others wanted Gu Fei to develop a leveling method that allowed them to skip 10 levels. Jian Nan's side wanted to understand more about the leveling method's restrictions, so that they could better cooperate with Ying Qi's market survey. Forest Shade City. Let's all go to Forest Shade City. Let's talk on the way. Gu Fei felt a headache coming on. Why was he getting busier and busier as he played? These people were now rich and overbearing. They finally had the boldness of Slender Waist Dance. They all grabbed their teleportation scrolls, and prepared to fly straight. This flight caused an accident. The scroll that Deepwater gave to Gu Fei had the coordinates. These guys took the scroll and copied the coordinates onto the scroll. However, when they used it, the few people on Gu Fei's scroll arrived at Forest Shade City. The others all crashed in Moonlit Night City, and they all crashed in the same place. The coordinates were wrong? Everyone was confused. But even if it was wrong, it couldn't be so uniform. Other than Gu Fei, they all crashed in one place in Moonlit Night City. Of course, these people didn't know the coordinates of the game map that Yi Xiao mentioned. They could only suspect that the teleportation scroll couldn't be used that way. So they followed the rules and bought the scroll, sent it to Gu Fei, recorded the coordinates, sent it back and flew. This time, nothing went wrong. They all arrived at Forest Shade City. When Deepwater heard the news, he had already come to pick them up. He didn't talk nonsense and directly led everyone into the big forest over there. When they entered, they saw that Deepwater had already figured out the location. He wasn't greedy and didn't go to the entire level 50 training area like Twilight and Cloud. Gu Fei let out a sigh of relief. This way, they wouldn't have to waste their time leveling method. I'll say it again. You guys are mostly archers. Apart from light priests, archers have the worst leveling efficiency. If you have better equipment, you might not even be worth learning. Gu Fei said. Hee. Deepwater smiled slyly. Actually, I didn't invite you here to learn some leveling efficiency method. Then what do you want? Gu Fei was puzzled. You're the #1 player in the PK world. Teach me some PK techniques. How beneficial would that be? Deepwater said. PK techniques? That's Kung Fu. Gu Fei cried. Kung Fu is Kung Fu. Teach me. Deepwater said. Gu Fei shook his head like a rattle drum. That won't do. There are strict requirements for us to teach Kung Fu. Let's not talk about the fact that I don't have the qualifications to teach disciples. Even if I did, I would have to strictly select the disciples. How could I get a bunch of people to learn just because they want to? Look at you. It's not like we want to learn from the system. If we really did that, what would we learn? You've been training for quite a few years, right? What I'm saying is that you should teach us your experience, and let everyone's PK level increase in a short amount of time. Do you think that's possible? Deepwater said. Impossible. Gu Fei replied bluntly. If it's going to increase in a short amount of time, then wouldn't my 20 years of training have been for nothing? Even though the game doesn't have to train the body, there's no way that a few theory classes every 2 or 3 days will be effective. How could it be so cheap? Then how long would it take for it to be effective? Deepwater asked. That depends on the individual's aptitude. For the outstanding ones, I think it would take at least a month or so. What do you think? 100 eras? Gu Fei said. 100 eras. Jingren shook his head and said, You're not talking about outstanding, you're talking about geniuses. I have experience in this area. An ordinary person would need at least 3 months. You don't actually need to talk about the body. If it's training the body, it'll take even more time and effort. 100 Era's Jingren was currently teaching in a bodyguard school, and he really did teach in this area. He was very experienced and spoke with confidence. Gu Fei immediately thought of his group of students. Even though they weren't much in his eyes, they were a cinch when it came to dealing with ordinary players. He then asked, "How long have you been teaching those students?" "Them? They just graduated, exactly 3 years. 100 Era's Jingren said. "Did you hear that?" Gu Fei said to Deepwater. "His 100 battle mercenary group only has superficial knowledge. It won't be a problem for them to deal with ordinary people. 3 years. I don't think it's superficial. You can't look at them with your superior eyes. They focus on practical results and don't grasp much theory. You should understand this." 100 Era's Jingren said with a slightly awkward expression. Sure enough, Gu Fei understood as soon as he heard it. Although such a large-scale teaching was forced by life, it still went against the principles of martial arts practitioners. That was why 100 Era's Jingren didn't teach too deeply when he was teaching. Sigh. Gu Fei shook his head and sighed. 3 years. Damn, can 3 weeks do it? Deepwater originally thought that his idea was exquisite, but after hearing Gu Fei and 100 Era's Jingren's words, he realized that he thought too simply of it. 3 weeks might not be impossible. 100 Era's Jingren suddenly said. Everyone looked at him, and even Gu Fei was a little puzzled. 100 Era's Jingren looked at everyone and said, "Because you won't get tired in the game." 100 Era's Jingren was indeed a master with teaching experience. In reality, apart from techniques, there was also physical training, which consumed a lot of energy. The daily class schedule wasn't so random, but a scientific and systematic way of distributing physical energy. At the very least, it was to ensure that after a day of exhaustion, one would immediately be refreshed after a night's sleep. Of course, it was impossible to practice for 1 day and sleep for 3 days. But in the game, there was no such problem. First of all, there was no need for physical training. And second, there was no need for rest at all. If one really wanted to, they could practice for 10 hours a day, which was absolutely impossible in reality. With 100 Era's Jingren's analysis, everyone was excited. Not only Deepwater, but Sword Demon and Yutian Shenming also wanted to learn a thing or two. During the trip to Sunset City, they had seen the skills of the ordinary players from the 100 Battles mercenary group, and they were definitely stronger than the average player. Is this appropriate? Gu Fei still felt a little nervous. At that time, a bunch of people in Sunset City wanted to learn from him, but he escaped without a trace. It's nothing, right? It's just a superficial combat technique. Are you afraid that you'll be invincible after learning it? Then all these years of learning would be for nothing. I haven't even conquered the world yet. After all, 100 Era's Jingren had already taken the first step. On this matter, it was Gu Fei who was more rigid. Deepwater saw that Gu Fei was still hesitating, but 100 Era's Jingren had no objections. He immediately worshipped 100 Era's Jingren like a master. As for Gu Fei, if he didn't want to teach him, then he could just stay where he was. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.